Hi, everybody. Welcome to SEAL Team 7, episode Crisis Core Reunion. Really excited. I have four very special guests with me, and it is today, December 13th, 2022. It is the release day of Crisis Core Reunion, the, the more than a remaster of Crisis Core that was released on essentially all modern consoles and Steam and Switch. Uh, Not a dig on Switch, but where's Switch 2? Am I right? Anyways, so we were gifted a advanced copy, a review copy of Crisis Core Reunion by Square Enix. So we've all had a chance to completely consume this game. And so thank you very much, Square Enix. Special shout out to Ibrahim Badi, whose name appears on the credits of Crisis Core Reunion, for helping me out and getting this going. Took a lot of conversation, but thanks to the big names that I got with me, we were able to make it happen. And we have torn this game apart. We have exhaustively torn it apart. So if you're hoping to have a spoiler-free discussion on this game, I maybe recommend tuning away and listening to the VOD on YouTube after you've consumed the game at a level you feel comfortable. Anyways, so with that warning in mind, let's bring us over to our esteemed guest. And I'm going to start below me with Sir Philip Hartshorn, who is dressed as like someone kind of familiar-ish. You want to tell us about yourself, Philip, and what you do and what you're doing now?
Sure. Hey guys, my name's Philip. I'm an American artist, filmmaker, actor. I love Final Fantasy. I lived at the Shaolin Temple in China as a warrior monk, made a documentary on it. I make short films, and yeah, I love Final Fantasy, lifetime fan. Crisis Core is a part of the Final Fantasy VII saga, which all of us in this group love and are super lore hungry, and we're super excited to talk about it today. I had never played Crisis Core before this because I never had a PSP, so I felt like a kid on Christmas morning, man. It was like that thing that you could never do as a kid, and you finally got to sink your teeth in. So, do you want me to just stop at the intro? Yeah, let's let everybody introduce themselves.
You did an amazing job.
Perfect.
How about we take it to our right and go to my boy Blitz?
Oh, what's good, man? Yo, what's up, guys? I am a multiverses content creator. I don't make any other videos on any other game besides multiverses. It's all multiverses over here.
Yeah.
It's what all my comments have been saying for the last like 3 months.
You're just a
Yo, it's an honor to be back. Love you guys. For those
Yes.
that don't know, if you guys are tuning in, I don't know if you guys that are in the chat saw my first appearance on here, but I look at this channel and the people that surround us, and it's really like the hub of like the content creator space for like Final Fantasy in general. And it was for a long time, it just felt like I was kind of just going about things like solo, but it wasn't until Sleepezi and Baby Seal approached and brought us all together that we started to really grow as like not just like as friends, but like as like peers and stuff. And it's just really dope to be back, and it's always a fun time being on this show. So I'm excited for a good night. And yes, I do make Final Fantasy VII videos.
You do. You make the shit out of them. They're really good. And some of the best combat breakdowns. Like, I'm really excited to see what you're gonna, break apart for this game. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get there. Okay, let's go right above you to my good friend, the Night Sky Prince.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm the Night Sky Prince. I have been making Final Fantasy videos for almost 6 years now, which is really hard to believe when I look back on it. I aggressively covered Remake when it first came out. Right now, I'm mostly focused on Final Fantasy 16. Got a chance to play Crisis Core Reunion, as we've all, the reason why we're all gathered here today. And I can just say this much before we really dive into the discussions, that it really took me by surprise, and I'm really happy to be here with guys that aren't just like some of the best FF content creators out there, but are also just great personal friends of mine. I love every single one of you guys so much, and I'm just so happy to be here with you guys, and as well as so many people in the chat who are also part of my own community as well, and part of like just just part of all of our communities. I'm just
Yeah.
really thankful to have all of you guys here, and to me, like the joy of doing this all this time has really just been, just sharing with you guys and these experiences and these moments. And I'm just very grateful that we have this time to do this right now. So
That's amazing.
agreed.
Thank you.
100%.
And
Absolutely.
last but not least is one of the most elusive creatures in the content creator sphere. Somebody known for 4-hour videos.
He's a
And
Nomura of content creators.
and
He's just a
Yeah.
voice.
yeah, he's just a voice. Joining us from an undisclosed location is my good friend Sleepezi.
Hi guys. Yeah, kind of echoing what NSP said. I'll get my introduction out of the way. I'm Sleepezi. I make, like it was alluded to, very long theory videos on Final Fantasy VII Remake. Currently waiting for the release. I know, as most of you who are fan of my channel are also waiting, the completion of my next video, Vessel of Rebirth, which I'm very excited that it is coming soon. And yeah, just it's been a while. I haven't had the opportunity to just sit down and enjoy really, really fine company in a while. So I am just looking forward to whatever this conversation brings. But usually it's been just, one or the other of us like sitting down with like one of these amazing people. And now just to have everybody here is actually awesome. So I'm just in it for the ride at this point. But yeah, really, really happy to be here with all of you guys.
Hell yeah.
Thank you, man.
So,
Amazing.
Crisis Core Reunion. Okay. And, Phil mentioned this right off the bat that this was originally a PSP game. And PSP was, PlayStation Portable. It was kind of it was a hit or miss console. Portables were of that nature, were kind of all the rage, but it was, was a little better than a PS1, not quite a PS2. It was a PS2 era portable console. And within the context of its release, Crisis Core was kind of the top of the PSP class. Like visually, it and Birth by Sleep were probably the two most visually impressive games on the PSP. But it's very much a PSP game, meaning that, there's a lot of shortcuts that had to be taken to make the game functional. And, pulling back the veil on it, you would find, a lot of strangely reused assets, a lot of stuff that, didn't quite make the cut. And, even the gameplay flow was sort of designed with portable in mind. And then obviously it went away. The console went away, and up until this point, there wasn't a viable way other than emulators which aren't necessarily reliable, to play Crisis Core. So Crisis Core Reunion gives people a very interesting opportunity to revisit the story. So going into it blind, Phil, I want to know what your overall impressions of the story were.
Absolutely, man. I really enjoyed it. And for me, it really was solidifying Zach's legacy for me, having, just kind of had to piece together what I could find over the years, right? And I said this in a lot of my videos, right? But the main thing for me is it hit me the moment I started to hear Brianna White, Britt Baron, Cody as Cloud, all these actors that we know now from Remake. There's this beautiful consistency now to this entire saga, right? Where in like 10 years, we're going to be able to go back, play Crisis Core, and just see this entire story unfold with the same actors and the same aesthetic, right? It's going to look the same because it's almost that exact remake look because they borrowed the assets, right? And it's just such a beautiful experience. So that right away just stood out to me. As far as the story and everything, it was really cool to kind of immerse myself in it, because never having played it, it's different when you can be Zach and you can control Zach and go through it, right? And one of the things that stood out to me right away is, I think because I could like identify with him more being with him, is all the other characters made more sense to me. Like, and again, you just mentioned PSP game. I said this in my review. It's a PSP game. There's no time. There's not space on the UMD disc to do a million cutscenes. So these characters like Angeal and Genesis are really cool and compelling ideas for characters, but they have so little time to flesh these guys out. It's like, okay, we got to get right to the plot. We got to get right to it. So, but what I will say is, especially with the new cast, especially Genesis, they really sold for me. I really like Genesis, which is something before a lot of us were kind of like, yeah, you know, he's a bit cheesy at times and stuff. He's a bit stilted. I really liked it. And you could tell they made the decision. It's like, okay, we don't have a lot of time, so let's lean into this angle that he's this like classicist, you know, obsessed studying this poetic, this epic poetry, ad nauseum and everything. But so that's kind of all they could do, is have him recite that. But what I will say is that made me so excited for the future of the story, be it in Rebirth or beyond, where we probably see Genesis again, or in some context, to see these characters fleshed out. All right, in a different format that says, hey, we don't have to fit it on a UMD disc, and it's not an old translation from the era where they just imitated the Japanese, right? The localization was a little bit different. See Advent Children versus Remake with the dialogue, right? It's a lot different. So I'm just super excited. It got me so jazzed up, and I'm sure you guys agree, just seeing the Nibelheim incident, man, we saw scenes from Rebirth, right? We saw the Sephiroth flashback, and we saw these lines delivered from Tyler as Sephiroth. Like, I lost my mind, man. I got so excited. Speaking of Sephiroth, I'm going to remove Aaliyah's lovely cosplay arms here. My girlfriend. But yeah, it was amazing. I can't say enough about it. So I'll take it over to you guys too. Kick it over to you guys. But man, it was a dream come true. I never got to play it, So I'm excited.
There you go.
It is. It's really interesting just to hear, like, because how, just as a feel for the room here, like, how many of us actually played the original?
Dude, I played it in
before going
Japanese.
into the remake.
Yeah.
In 2008, I think. Actually, funny story. Actually, I found my PSP, my original one.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, I got a crazy story about this, but we'll talk.
Did the
about that
battery
later.
fucking explode into?
This is I still have my Pandora battery and everything too.
Oh,
no way.
damn!
I did the same thing.
I did too.
It's so great.
Jig kick batteries. Okay, well, all
so
right. That is an
all have
interesting
played it.
point. Yeah, I think we all played it except for Phil, and and like I know that I think I imported it, like, and I think that so did Night Sky Prince, right?
Yeah. I did a playthrough of it in Japanese first, and then when it came out in English, I was able to finally like really take it in.
Now, just to preface that, my relationship with the game has been tenuous. Okay, so just to be totally fair, like the first time I played the game, I was like, "Wow, this is crazy for a PSP game." But like as time has gone by, I've grown to kind of, and like fans of the channel will know, maybe resent Crisis Core a little bit, or a lot, depending on who you ask and what like time of day it is, and where my blood sugar's at. Crisis Core Reunion sort of did give me like an adjustment of my overall feeling about Crisis Core. I want to know if you had a similar experience, Ryan.
Yeah, actually. So I think it's quite obvious at this point that I do not like the compilation of FF7. In fact, the only real masterwork for me personally that they've done with the work with the number 7 on it has really been the original. And I like Remake, but I don't put it necessarily on the same par as the original yet.
Sure.
Crisis Core, however, oh man, it was impressive as a PSP title. Like when it first came out, it's mind blowing. Back in the day when we thought that we were never going to get a remake, it was the coolest thing ever, right? Because we got to see those characters scaled at a graphical fidelity that was so much better than what the PS1 was able to offer at the time. And it was voiced. It wasn't fully voiced at that time, but it was still voice acted a lot more than what the original was, right? With no voice acting. The gameplay, unfortunately, is nowhere near what this remaster has offered us. And playing through this remaster has definitely improved my opinion of Crisis Core. I'm still not like a huge fan of a lot of the story and dialogue moments in this game, but I can say that now that I do think that if you go play Crisis Core Reunion, I think it's a good time, and I can recommend it as a video game if you are into Final Fantasy VII. And I had fun. I had fun playing it, right? Because a lot of times when people talk about like, you know, enjoying Crisis Core, what they really mean is like enjoying Zack's character or enjoying story moments, but not necessarily playing it, because combat in the original was nowhere near what it is now. But I think that yeah, it was not good. But now you can actually play Crisis Core Reunion, and you can really sink your teeth in the combat and actually really enjoy yourself. It's not quite where Remake is at, like with combat, because Remake has exceptionally good combat, but it's not quite there. But it's really good. It's good to the point of where I can say, hey, if you like Final Fantasy, you need to play this. And I think one of the biggest improvements too was voicing a lot of the NPC dialogue, and they voice everything. They voice everything in this game too, which dramatically increases one's impression of the presentation in this game.
I'm gonna just go out on just really quickly say that was something that I took so for granted when they had announced Reunion. And I was like, oh, so what? But then, and because a lot of my complaint about the story, because even though I like it, the original plot, and obviously that's been retained pretty much wholesale in this one, it was always just like the presentation of this game is just not for everyone, and to not recognize that there's like a niche audience for that sort of story was one thing entirely. But the fact that now all of these lines are voiced, it completely transforms your initial impression. A lot of things that you might have just glanced over or just thought were unimportant, just hearing these actors deliver, like, and Brianna White, like that's like pretty much like pinnacle of, like, in my opinion, she's the one who fucking sells this whole thing. Like, her character is like perfectly represented, and like it such a great, so like,
Cody Christian's Cloud is what really
flawless.
God,
really.
Flawless.
Do you guys remember back in the day where like the English dub was like first premiering like right after? Because, you know, back then we did not get these wonderful simul dubs that we get now, these worldwide releases where everything comes out in English at the exact same time. And back then there was a lot of complaints about Steve Burton's scream and in the ending cutscene when Zack dies. There was a lot of complaints about that. They're like, oh, it doesn't sound as good as Sakurai's performance where he screams at the end and no. And Cody Christian, I think, is the best out of those three. Like, I feel like Cody Christian, like the way he delivers it, is my favorite out of all of the performances of that scene.
Right, and he's got like no chance of losing his job anytime soon too.
Yeah. He is,
unless he tries to continue that rap career.
Oh, The Hills is a classic.
It is a classic. Okay, all right.
Step on that.
Okay,
so Cody
nailed it. Yeah, I agree.
Nailed it.
Yeah. So okay, so that's a pretty. I mean, for NSP, I mean that's like the best FF7 related thing that I've heard, you know, in several years. But, and you did bring up combat, and so, you know, I was pretty exhaustive with looking at the combat and really trying everything. And I think that probably at the time of this recording, simply because of maybe, I don't know, the luxury of having the game, I have the speed run record for Minerva in hard mode. I was able to beat her in under 8 minutes, which that's a big deal, because in Crisis Core Reunion, spoilers, her HP is increased from 20 million to 77 million, which is like such a substantial increase. They also gave her some attacks that have more attributes to remove the raise status. So without like using sort of an exploit, not an exploit, but using Jill Toss and SP Turbo, the battle takes about 53 minutes and a lot of tries, and might be, without using exploits, the hardest Final Fantasy battle I have ever fought. Which is kind of saying a lot. Everything in between, though, all the other missions were still the missions. You get to a certain level and you just kind of press a button through them. But during the main campaign, you could really feel that what they did is they took the original combat system in its entirety and then just added stuff on top of it. So it isn't quite like Remake, in my experience. It's more like they added something on top of a pre-built system. So I'm curious, though, from like the combat guy, what are your thoughts been so far on combat with Crisis Core Reunion and just Crisis Core Reunion in general, Blitz?
Honestly, I was not expecting to enjoy pressing buttons in this game as much as I am right now. Like I'm hitting everything. Like I remember the first day when I was playing through and I finally got my hands on it, and just like the way that the actual attacks feel, like you can feel that little like vibration that you get from it. Like they really put a lot of meat behind all of the hits, the impacts and everything like that. And I just thought it was crazy that you could actually cancel specific things with like block, and in order to increase your DPS. It doesn't really matter much later on in the end of the game, but like it's still really cool to see that there's elements to, I guess, like what you can do kind of in like Remake in this, which is fantastic. But overall, I was surprised, very much surprised. I mean, because they kept talking about it. They kept talking like, "Oh, the combat like has been revamped. They did this. This is different, or whatever." I'm like, "All right, I'll see. I'll see.
Yeah.
I'll see how it feels." And I was actually like really impressed because I wasn't. I wouldn't say I wasn't excited going in, but I remember when, because I remember you got to play it before I got a chance to play it, and I was just asking you, I was like, "So how's it feel? How's the combat feel? What are you doing right now? What are you wearing?" Like just trying to like figure out things early as I can, because it was something that I was really focused on. But all in all, somebody had asked me today. They were like, "How do you recommend this? Like, if Final Fantasy VII Remake was their first like Final Fantasy game, do they recommend me? Do I recommend them getting like Crisis Core Reunion?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can confidently say that, because straight up, the game itself, while it does not exactly mirror Remake, it retains the same UI, the same consistency all across the board with the voice actors. But in general, the combat is really buttery, smooth, fluid, snappy. The 60 frames makes a huge difference. It feels phenomenal, like really, really good. And but all in all, as far as like the game goes, I still feel the same way I did when I first played it. Like I liked the game, but there are like a few surprises for me. Like we were talking about this a little earlier, but like Genesis actually completely did like a 180 for me. Like I was I put out a video a few days ago just like shitting on this one scene that Genesis was in, and seeing it this time like
better
in Reunion, I was like, wow, actually I actually did not mind that at all. It was pretty good. Like I still think that it shouldn't have been done.
Sure.
But it's much more bearable this time around, and I'm really excited and looking forward to like what they do with Genesis's character like in the future going forward. He's actually a character that I'm looking forward to. I'm excited for. The voice actor is great, and I just want to see what strides they can hit with like newer up-to-date dialogue, really, instead of like forcing him to do his loveless thing. I mean, he can still do it. It doesn't really bother me as much, but it's more about like just in general the mannerisms of the character. I'm actually on board with Genesis now.
I
Oh,
know
wow.
how fucking crazy it is to fucking sit here and hear half of the people on this panel just be like, you know what, Genesis kind of fucks now. And I'm like,
and
Jesus
look,
Christ.
and this is the greatest segue, because this was going to be my my question for you now. This is where you shine, right? So, we got the cinematic language. We got the veteran FF7 hater on board.
Based.
No, he's
Dang.
He only hates because he
FF7
loves it. If he
FF7
didn't love it
critic.
as much, he wouldn't
Hey,
hate as hard.
I know.
I got my fucking FF7
Look,
Uniqlo shirt on for today.
I
Look,
was
So
I was
I
looking
believe in
everywhere
you.
for that fucking shirt.
OG,
I
bro.
know.
NSP.
Yo,
God damn.
I'm
Uh,
gonna need that, bro. You wear large or what you wear?
It's meaty.
I can squeeze it. I
But
can
if
squeeze
I,
it
dude,
too.
are you gonna try and
bro, if I
take it
gain any
off of him?
more, if I
I
put
will
on any
I
more
can drive
muscle,
over right now.
I'll politely request and also Google where I
yeah,
can buy them now.
Yeah, dude, absolutely.
And
I
we
think
got
they're a limited time thing, which so good luck. eBay, the stinky eBay shirt.
we got
Um,
Blitz here, the combat specialist. But you, Sleepezi, are the lore guy. You're the guy that makes 4-hour breakdowns. You've put like 12 hours of videos trying to convince all of us that Loveless was an acceptable element
It's still debatable. All of this is
yeah.
Addition
I'm not that far
to
in
the
right now.
lore of Final
Yeah.
Fantasy VII. So, you've consumed, all of the cutscenes, the lore as it's presented, although it's, remarkably similar, the fresh take on it, some of the, like we said, NPC dialogue, new visuals, new framing. What has this put in your lore brain? What has Reunion done for you in terms of what it'll do for us in your upcoming video?
So I think there's a lot that I have to say about that, especially like in the new video. And I just full disclosure, like before even Reunion was a thing, this video was going to be very, very heavily based on the content of Crisis Core that I'm making now. So the fact that the planets have perfectly aligned themselves for this remake to be this Reunion coming out and Rebirth kind of on the horizon for winter, it really feels, and I have been saying this off and on since I started even covering Crisis Core like more in depthly. Uh it is the most important compilation game in this series now. I didn't say that before, but what I did say is that Crisis Core is also the perfect template for remake. The thing that I also preface that with usually is that Crisis Core is notoriously inaccessible, both in getting the game and then also playing the game. Uh, it had a really hard line for people, especially Final Fantasy VII fans, uh, to jump into that game and obviously compare it to the original, which was totally deserved, I think, especially because the game is so beloved, the original. Um, one of the things that I still think is in the DNA of even Reunion is it is a PSP game, and it is very much still very much tied to a lot of the issues that people have with the story, because they didn't change any of the content. Um, however, with that said, one of the things I am 100% convinced of now is that people now that people have Reunion and this new trilogy is coming out, this will be an essential part of that story, and when it's melded into the original story, I think, which it will kind of seamlessly transition, like for those who are playing Reunion, played Remake, and then are going to play Rebirth, and then the third title, you are going to see a very direct line of conversation from Crisis Core all the way to the end. It is, and the thing that's the issue with Crisis Core is that it might not connect with its audience emotionally, but in the right context of OG, that is going to completely, I think, in the best way possible, actually elevate the original story to a different level of, like, whether you're looking at it cinematically, whether you're looking at the content of it from a lore perspective. It's literally the perfect, like, sauce to be throwing into the pot of the original game. On its own, it might not still be able to stand on its own 2 feet. Like, I don't, even though, like, I know that Phil had his first experience with the game, and it's awesome. It's really awesome to see people, like, really engaging with it in the way that Phil did. I don't know if it's gonna change or turn heads enough to really get people invested in that story, but I for sure, 100% without a doubt, think after the trilogy is done, people are gonna go back to this game and be like, "How the fuck did I not see this the first time?" It really is the definitive language of all of the thematic narrative of Remake, and definitely the new series. So for me, having been doing that research and then going into Reunion and just seeing, like, just the enhancement of just the visual, like, we mentioned the Nibelheim scene, and we've been talking about like, just the graphical quality of this remaster remake. uh, you watch that Nibelheim scene and you look at the face of Sephiroth, you know what I see a lot of? I see a lot of Kadaj in
Yeah.
that performance. I see a lot of this, like, narrative tying in
How he says mother, yeah.
subtle narrative injection of this sort of, like, childlike version, which we are familiar with because that is the way that he's sort of presented in that scene regardless. But Crisis Core is just injecting this finally in such a perfect way, this perspective that this is all unifying, this is all coming into play, and they're using the entire narrative force that they've built, like, in the language of Final Fantasy VII, to their advantage in each of these games going forward. So, like,
Yeah.
kind of tossing it back to just saying, like, I think what Phil was saying about the Nibelheim scene and getting excited for Nibelheim in Rebirth, I like I can't even imagine how deep each scene is going to, like, just in the moment to moment, reflect this amazing story in such a bigger way. It's actually, and again, I wasn't going into it thinking that I was gonna get that from, like,
Sure.
Reunion at all, but just being so impressed with just every little nod and nuance that they're really taking advantage of. So, like, from a lore perspective, Crisis Core Reunion is essential, I think, to the experience of this other thing. I think it will enhance it. You don't need it, but, like, if you're really getting into the weeds of things, it's phenomenal, and they're doing everything that they need to be doing to set that up. And that's why Nomura said that it's like it's kind of being tied into the trilogy. Like, this is not only the prequel to your original Final Fantasy VII OG, but it is 100% the prequel and the baseline. It's fully priming you for the rest of the series in such a beautiful way. So I'm super stoked about it in that way.
Yeah, that's well said. So one of the things I did, so we briefly touched on this. We talked about voice acting, and I just want to get this question out of the way because it's probably most of the discourse that I'm seeing is that, you know, they recast the voice actors, and except for like 2 lines, which that's this whole other thing. But for the most part, I am a big fan of the new voice actors. I, for one, did not go in with a lot of confidence based on, like, things I saw in the trailer, and quite frankly, things I saw in the first, like, well, for me, 4 chapters of the game. In the first 4 chapters of the game, I found, in particular, Caleb, who voices Zach, to be just very jarring. And it was jarring for a couple reasons. One, I had an expectation affiliated with, Rick Gomez, the previous VA, who a lot of people think did very good. And I'm certainly not saying he didn't. He did great. But for me personally, I heard the game first in Japanese. And so for me, it's really hard to separate that. And I will say that at the end of the entire game, that there's this weird cutoff that happens at like chapter 4 where all of a sudden Caleb starts, I don't know, sounding different, for lack of a better word. I have a fan theory that maybe, the first 4 chapters was recorded before Remake came out, and then it came out, and then everybody told him he needed to do something different. Maybe. I don't know. That's just a fan theory. Total headcanon right there. But after that point, he started to line up more and more with what I remember Zach's characterization to be. And, that could just be a reflection of how I see Zach Fair. Zach Fair is a great protagonist for this game. He is not my favorite character in the compilation by any stretch, and that's okay. You don't always have to have the main character be a character that you like and still enjoy the game. I don't necessarily like the character. Like, I wouldn't be his friend probably, type thing. But that doesn't mean that he isn't being expressed the way that the developers want to express him. And I think that at the end of everything, Caleb does a good job capturing what the developer's intention for Zach ends up being. And a couple of things do lend to that. One is the fact that he sounds more like the Japanese VA to me. The other is that you hear a ton more dialogue in this game.
Yes.
I did the math, and Caleb voices 5.2 times as many lines as Rick Gomez does in this game. If you add all the NPC dialogue, all the missions. So for me, I have now heard Caleb as Zach roughly 5 times as I've heard Rick Gomez. And so he's really lined up with the character for me. As far as the other characters go, they're all great. I think Angeal's voice actor was good. I think that I'm a big Tyler Hoechlin supporter or Hecklin supporter, and have, been harassed as a result. Cody nailed it. I think every voice actor here nailed it. That being said, it's still Crisis Core dialogue, and it's impossible to ignore how fucking cheesy the dialogue is. And so I'm like watching it, I'm going, this is so much better. And then I'm thinking in a vacuum, would I think this is good? And I don't know if the answer to that is yes.
You know what?
Yeah.
Just to really, this is why I'm just going to bring up Brianna White. People are going to think that I'm like 100% Aerith camp here, but like for her and Sephiroth having really experienced their voice capabilities so far from Remake, and then going into this one, I came in with that sort of same bias, being like, okay, the dialogue is going to ruin any actor that touches it. Like, the performances are going to be sucked into the vacuum of this writing, and no one's going to be able to actually deliver on this. But I would say that Brianna White's performance feels very similar to the character that I grew to like a lot in Remake. And Sephiroth is also, his voice actor is also adding to that same mythology that he's kind of building. Like, those two voice actors, I think, have totally keyed into the character and just know exactly how to make anything sound like those characters. Caleb, on the other hand, one of the things that, like, the voice acting for me and just the dialogue of all of these sort of notes is that, like, Genesis's voice actor seemingly is just eating up the scenery. like, and that's his character. Angeal is like the stoic like teacher, and he nails that part pretty well. I always liked the original voice actor for Zack because he really did feel so clueless in the game that he was existing in, as like a normal person. But definitely during those chapters that you were referring to, feel insanely like PS2 dialogue level of like absence of mind, not to be like harsh on it or anything like that, but it really feels, it almost feels dated. It feels more dated than the older voice actor's performance. Which I was shocked. I was like, I came in trying to negate my sort of own because I had my own perspective of that before going in, and I was like, I'm gonna try and shed that bias. And because I was picking on one particular dialogue in the trailer, just and comparing it to the original game, that whole scene is
What the hell are you doing, Angeal?
Yeah. What the hell are you doing, Angeal?
Shut up.
What are you talking about? Like, I was like, oh my God, like this is a gold mine for other reasons than it should be, but
Yeah.
like it, but and that's fine for its own enjoyment. But going back to the original scene, it really does, like, you are sold on the fact that this guy is literally clueless, but he's also very emotional about that. So when you took that out for me, and that was actually a fear of mine, is that people initially might be playing, because the performance does get a lot better over time. So like that fan theory totally checks out, but at the same time, you're just thinking to yourself, are people going to make it through 4 chapters of this and be sold on this guy?
Yeah.
Because that's a bit into the game. You know what I mean? That's a bit into the game to be getting into, like, I don't know.
Well,
but that's just my opinion about it.
I'm curious. We do have a filmmaker here, and I do want to know, what were your thoughts, Phil, on the performances in general?
I really like the performances for the most part. My thought process on the Zack thing was that I think it was more direction. I think in the beginning they were like, we want you to sound like a puppy. Everybody refers to him as a puppy, and there's several scenes where you'll see, like in the DMW, literally Angeal is like, he's like, hey man, I'm ready. He's like, you forgot your sword.
Yeah.
I have to get my sword. Like Zack is, the himbo times 1,000, like that. That's what they're pushing down our throat, right? So I think they really were trying to be like, and you look at the dialogue too, look at what he's saying. He's literally like, can I let loose? Yeah, can I do that? Like, he is completely obsessed, like, only with that, like battle and everything like that. So I think that's probably what they were doing. And then if you look at it after he matures and after Angeal's death and after all these like traumatic things happen to him, he gets the long hair, the time skip and everything, his voice sounds completely different. So I feel that's probably what it was. I like your fan theory too, of course, but that seemed to make sense to me. So I feel like it was
totally the younger version versus older version for sure.
And then when you get to the end, like, and I think Caleb shines in general on the quieter scenes and in the kind of tragic, like serious scenes and everything. And man, you talk about the ending briefly, talk about like a great filmmaking scene and stuff. The ending was really good, man. And for me, it completely lost like the kind of like, this is a weird old anime. The director just said, yeah, literally sound exactly like a Japanese guy. Just same tones, same everything. Match the vocal. Just do that. Like, hence we have James Arnold Taylor doing the ha ha ha. The Japanese actor sounds like a parrot in those scenes. It's like so high pitched and so extreme, right? So look what that does. It sounds unnatural, but for me, it was completely gone. Cody is like a powerhouse, and it was completely bereft of any anime tones and everything. I was so impressed. The standout for me in the performances, though, was Genesis.
Yeah.
This guy was great. And
like I said,
I love you, Phil.
I can't.
I agree.
And I can't believe I'm like excited about Genesis. And the thing that hit me is this, and again, this is my filmmaker brain, going insane, is I can't help but picture this character, how they can delve more into this character. Because again, having finally played the game, I never knew this. When you go in the end and you see like his childhood bedroom, secret science project, whatever that was, where he has like the trophies he won as a kid, There's like Benora white apple juice he submitted and stuff, and it's like, wow, that's an amazing scene. Like that's an amazing character thing to talk about that, and we never see it, of course, because PSP. And think about this character, like again, this sort of epic poetry obsessed classicist who's like an archaeologist digging to find these tomes of Loveless, like piece together the story. What are this guy who's become a monster and who's degrading is going to die? And it's like, what are this guy's insecurities? You know, what does this guy do on the day to day? Like, what's he like when he's alone? We never see him for 1 second alone, as far as I know. He just always shows up in like this awesome dramatic thing. I'm like, man, there's so much opportunity for this guy. And it kind of made me realize, you know, my imagination is running wild here for scenes. It's like, man, if they could tap into this, I think he's a really awesome character. And I think he's an amazing addition to the compilation if they tap into him more and we see more of it. But I mean, I enjoyed him as it was for the game. So I think that's one of the standouts for me is just him in general performances. And I do think that Caleb, Zach's voice actor, the later chapters, like all you guys seem to agree, were exceptionally better. But that's where my mind went for the part where a lot of you guys may be like, it sounds a little unnatural. I want to remind you, you guys already said it, it's the dialogue. A lot of it is essentially undeliverable. Like I'm looking at it too, as like you guys know, I'm into voice acting, and I'm like, I don't know how I would. It's so ridiculous. Like some of the lines are insane. There's a scene where Angeal literally just dumps like 5 minutes of exposition, and it's hilarious because Zach is like, I don't know what you're talking about.
The mother couldn't continue to live, and neither can the son.
Yeah. And it's like, what? And he's like, yeah, my cells have been copied in the gene cells of the copy of the S cells, and you're like, what? And it's just, it's so much so fast because they can't do Hideo Kojima like 30-minute cutscene insert there to like spread it out and have this cool like dramatic thing. He literally is like, all right, we got a 2-minute cutscene on the UMD disc here available, so just do it there. And then, Angela has to die for this too. It's like, wow, we got to do all this dramatic stuff right now. So yeah, I think a lot of it is that it's not only the dialogue is so dated because it's just literal translation, no localization. Like, and I would encourage you to look at the what is it called, intergrade ending with Caleb. I thought he was just as good as the ending.
That's the best thing. That's 100%.
So that was gonna be carrying into my point too.
Yeah, perfect.
Go for it.
That. Yeah, like with Remake, when I first played it and I'm listening to him talk, and the whole time, like, I wish I still had this playthrough recorded, but I said it on the recording. I was like, why the fuck does he sound like Sonic? I'm like, who the hell voices this dude? And I just felt I wasn't sold on him at the end of Remake. And so when we got to intermission and integrate and stuff, and we got to see more of like a newer direction, and I guess maybe he got some feedback off of that, it sounded way better. And I was like, okay, like, yo, he sounds pretty good. This actually feels natural. It feels like a human talking in a conversation and not just trying to re-say things that somebody else said in the same way. Like, it just didn't sound natural to me, right? So like with Crisis Core Reunion, I do like Caleb's voice, and this didn't like take a step back in a sense, right? Because I felt like, with Remake to Intermission, it was a step forward, like huge step forward. With Crisis Core Reunion, I wouldn't say, somebody had asked me, they're like, could you consider it a step backwards? And I wouldn't say I do, because it's still, he's trying to sound like something else that already existed before him instead of trying to do something new in a better format. So I think that going forward, Caleb Pierce will continue to do well and thrive and eventually get on the same level as how we all feel about Genesis right now.
Yeah.
Oh,
Going
something else I want to say too is
forward.
about Zach. Yeah, going forward. About Zach is that a lot of people seem to think Zach is like supposed to be cool and like whatever. And that's what I was getting at with the puppy thing. It's like Zach is a nerd, dude. He's like this super what's the word? Enthusiastic, earnest, overly earnest nerd who's just obsessed with being a hero and stuff. So that's why
He's a
I
cop,
thought that's
bro.
probably what they did. Yeah, it's probably what they did.
He's
At
a
the beginning,
narc,
like, you
dude.
have to sound like a cheese ball, right? You have to sound like a cheese ball, and then at the end, like he becomes a hero, and he's like, "Shit, like this isn't what I wanted it to be. This isn't really." And he matures, and he's like, "Damn, like life is tough. Being a hero is terrible." Like you have to kill your friend, you literally have to murder your mentors and your friends. Like, and I think that's what they're going for. But there's no time. Like, where was the scene where we hear Zach say that? It was the most important character moment. Like, I became a hero, and it's not what I like. It's this empty thing. Like it was all just a fantasy. It was all just like a dream. And that's a beautiful thing. So it's the PSP.
I take that from the soldier is a den of monsters to stay away from it line.
Yeah.
I kind of
there it is.
get that from there.
I love that line. That was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's there, but it's just like they could only fit a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Time to bring it down. Thoughts, Ryan?
Bring it down. Oh man,
What the fuck?
it's my job as the super villain.
No.
As the super
No,
as
look.
the super villain of Final Fantasy VII. I am here. I am here to bring the mood down and to make you all feel like shit. So I hope you're ready.
I'm ready.
I liked most of the performances.
Yeah.
However, there was one performance I could not do it, and it's Zach. I know everyone else got used to Zach's new VA, but Rick Gomez still clears for me. That's still the Zach voice that I prefer.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that by the end, Caleb does a decent job, but I still don't think that he gets to where Rick Gomez like really got to with Zach. And it is true that most of the more grating lines come chapter 5 and before.
Mhm.
And that is because that is kind of like the most cheeky part of the game, right? It's because it's before things start to get serious and before the time skip that happens. And that's when the voice direction shifts, right? And part of what makes the voice acting get a little bit better, a little bit more tolerable there, is that I think Philip had kind of pointed this out, that they kind of tell him to like take the puppy level a bit down, right? And then that's where it starts to get there a lot more. But I do think that for the most part, everyone else killed it. Actually replaying this game, especially, I kind of walked away with very similar takes on Genesis. I feel like he's the best portrayed character in this game. Not the best character in the game, but the best portrayed character in this game in particular. Especially like when you kind of go back through and really wrap your head around Genesis's story. I feel like his portrayal in this game is really interesting, and he is by far the most interesting character in this game to me. Which surprisingly, you'd think it'd be Sephiroth, right? Like, like if you gun to my head, I'd probably say Sephiroth normally, but no, I think it's really Genesis. I think Sephiroth is more interesting actually in the main Final Fantasy VII and how they portray his mental breakdown there. But honestly, Genesis' new voice actor was really good. I feel like he delivered a lot of his lines in a way that allowed me to process Genesis a little bit more.
Right.
than
I
like
agree.
in a way that I didn't necessarily get to do when I played OG. So the one thing that I did not expect walking away from this was to say that I have a significantly higher opinion of Genesis than I did the first time I played this. That was probably the most surprising thing about Crisis Core Reunion. Now, I'm gonna have to. This is where I kill your joy, Sleepezi. This is where I blissfully murder your joy. No. I would still prefer he not exist. Like straight up. I would still be much more happy if he was not like a thing. Now, that being said, I feel like Remake has already gone in a direction that's already so far from what I was like hoping for Final Fantasy VII to be, that I'm okay with him now. I'm like very much at peace with Genesis showing up. So I'm not gonna be like, oh, I hate Rebirth because Genesis showed. I'll be cool with it. Like I'm actually gonna be excited when Genesis invariably shows up in Rebirth. it would not have been the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth that I would have made if I was the director, creator,
but
producer.
that ship has sailed so long ago.
Yeah, that ship sailed so long ago, and
Yeah.
now I'm just on for the ride of like whatever they're going to make.
Yeah.
And I think that they could do something really interesting with it. So now I'm just like, if they're not going to do the Evo 7 that I'm hoping for, then I just hope that they do something that's really entertaining. And Genesis, I think when you look at him, he's actually the character that I feel like I would be the most out of these three in the situation and the way that it's portrayed in Crisis Core, because he's the one that's like, you know what, F Shinra. Why are we, doing this for these greedy corporate fucks? Like, why are we surrendering? Why are we rolling over for them, right? And he questions it in a way that Sephiroth and Zack don't, right? And I'm just like, Genesis is the one that's playing 5D chess, and everyone else is just so complicit. And
I want Genesis to have a line where he's just like, "Yo, you know who I am, motherfucker? I made juice. I made dumb apple juice when I was 9 years old. All these adults in my village didn't even think about that."
There's a lot of like truth to what you're saying, and I think that's actually like I am gonna take just a lore moment just to sort of go through what you're saying, because I think you're absolutely right. Is that Sephiroth and Angeal are mostly representative of two like extremes of like what can happen as like a hero. Is that you can be so selfless to a fault, or you can be so utterly consumed with the image of a hero that you fall apart. And both of those characters sort of willingly go in those directions. In whether it's destiny or whatever it is that's sort of leading them to those places, that's sort of like more of a larger discussion. But for Genesis, he and actually that's very interestingly categorized in Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, and just there's an ongoing sort of thematic sort of relevance, and I've brought it up I think in each of our conversations about this, but like there's a family dynamic to that as well, where it's like the want of a mother or the desire for a family. Is that Sephiroth accepts this alien as his mother, and Angeal is very much tied to his humanity through his own family. That's sort of what gives him that sort of ideal hero perspective. So it's those two perspectives that shape that narrative. But for Genesis, he fucking murders his parents. He doesn't give a fuck. He's like, these, like, everything is alive, and like you can't like fool me into thinking that this is. So rather than Genesis accepting the role that he's given in this narrative, he's just like, fuck the script. I'm listening to this book, and like I'm gonna just find the answer for myself. But because none of these things are actually the answer that I'm looking for.
No,
which ends up working.
I agree
for him.
with. Yeah. He's so compelling, like as a character, if you think about it. And there's these crazy moments where like we see 2 seconds of him and Jill and Sephiroth as friends back in the day. And it's a crazy scene that we all enjoy, I think. I mean, that scene is so hype. But like what is their day-to-day life like? It would have been so fascinating.
Yeah.
And, dude, the scene where he seeks the goddess for his entire life, he's obsessed with this religious poetic text. He finally comes face to face with the goddess and is condemned. And it's like, that's a great scene.
That's a great theme for him in general too, is like in the infamous Nibelheim interruption scene where Genesis interrupts, this famous scene that we have this historical idea of how it goes along. He just shows up and he's like he's like very politely asking his friend Sephiroth, like, hey, you got any of that sweet DNA? And yeah, it comes off a little thirsty, for Sephiroth's genetic material or whatever. But like, that being said, like he gives him this opportunity, like, hey, can you help me? And Sephiroth, in the way that Sephiroth dismisses him in this, like, as this disgust thing, it's part of the theme you will rot. You know,
That was badass. Yeah.
yeah, it was a surprisingly good, and I think, I mean, the actual script is no different, but just the performance, the subtlety, it really feels like the actor really understood, you know, like the relevance of
The
what he said.
nuance.
And there was
Made a lot of
one,
difference.
Crazy to say.
it's crazy too. There's one line that I could not like my mind was blown, and it was at the end, and Genesis just said, he said, "Is it good?" He just asked in the most tender way of Cloud, or of Zach.
That was such a good line.
Like,
yeah.
he just asked Zach if the apple was good. He's like, "Is it good?" And then you could just feel all of his humanity dumping into that like very tender request. Like,
You
I
can
don't.
hear like that childhood, like this is a big part of my life. The apples,
Yeah.
and this is really special. Yeah.
And you're right. So like I'm with Ryan. I think he's the most improved character. He's in it. So you know, like, if you're gonna, like, if you have the monumental task of making a character like that's literally gacked into something compelling, like, you know, this is a good start. I do want to say I actually agree with what Ryan said about Rick Gomez too. I do think that Rick Gomez is a more likable Zach.
Yeah.
I do not
100%.
think Zach is supposed to be that likable, though. I'm serious. I do think that our idea, our impression of Zach that Rick Gomez gave us sort of mischaracterized him, and in what I feel is like an annoying way. And maybe I'm just a hater, but like, I think, hey, if, like, you know, Caleb is a little bit more jarring, I think Zach is supposed to be kind of jarring. Like,
I think that there's like, okay. I think the way, at least from because I agree with Ryan completely.
Base.
I feel like there is a fine line between like intentional and unintentional, and there is definitely a lot of, from at least the performance perspective, that feels very unintentionally delivered in a certain type of way. And it's like, whether the direction was received and delivered is one thing, but to elevate material, because again, going back to Aerith, it doesn't feel like she's transferred games as much to me. Like, there's a very seamless narrative that I go back to and listen to, like, her dialogue, and I'm like, this is Aerith from Remake. But when I'm listening to and Genesis and Sephiroth, like, they're elevating the material to a level that, like, is acceptable, like more than acceptable, which is like a huge accomplishment for like the dialogue.
sure.
Whereas it feels like a flat rate sort of deal with like Zach, where it's like, this is what's said, this is what I gotta say to say it, and then hit that one mark and not bring it just one level above. Whereas at least, like, even if you don't necessarily like how Rick Gomez characterized Zach,
No, I
there's
mean, he's a better
something-
actor. Nobody's saying that he's not.
no, I know, and
Yeah.
I'm just saying is that there is a direction there, and
Right.
he did push that performance. Whether or not it's the way that the character should have, like, I agree,
Right. It was
like,
a little
might
lacking,
not
and it wasn't
deliver
cringe
that.
enough. Like, that's the bottom line. Zach is cringe.
There's a
It
difference
was
though
too
between
cool.
cringe PS2 era, like, voice acting cringe, and like character cringe. Like, intentional character cringe is one thing, and then yeah, there's the other.
No,
don't
I,
know.
I hear you. You're just wrong. Okay, so moving on. Okay, we so obviously this game didn't have any story changes, like, of note. And when I say it didn't have any story changes, like, they had opportunities to, like, do very subtle, easy things to link this to Remake. They intentionally scrubbed stamp from the entire world. There's no stamp. There are even
I feel like that was a
like,
direct shot at you.
it felt like it. There were even like there were even like graffiti pieces that had stamp before, where they like removed Stamp. Like
Whoa.
they went out of their way. So
Damn.
that one feels very, very intentional. The other stuff though, it feels like, and as somebody that's really got to tear back the wall in this game, can tell you that this game is one of the most ambitiously faithful remasters by a third-party company I've ever seen. And when I say remaster, there are things that they remastered in this game that don't have any value to the player, but were in the original game, to the point where it feels like there was a disconnect between the team remastering it and the source material. And the best example I have of that is Vice and Nero. At the end of Crisis Core, Vice and Nero come and take Genesis' body and, open up this whole big story can of worms. In the original, they just used, because you don't actually see their bodies, they just used Zack's body for Nero and Angeal's body for Vice, but gave him a little bit of hair. So now it's the modern era. There's no space limitations with the UMD. So why wouldn't you just add the fully available Nero models and Vice models that are available thanks to intermission? They didn't do that. They did the exact same thing. They used Zack's body for Nero and Angeal's body for Vice. And it's as if they just were given a task: remaster this game as
completely.
awesome as you can in Unreal Engine. And they did. So like every little detail, like all the maps, they're not rebuilt in the way that Remake built. Like Sector 8 in Remake looks way different than it does in Crisis Core. So therefore, Crisis Core Reunion looks just like a super high def version of what was in Crisis Core. Right? So they just very faithfully remastered this. The post-credit scene has one minor difference. They used a different Aerith model, and that's it.
Yeah.
And that's like it. They made this, honestly, like the most substantial change to any of the cutscenes besides the Buster Sword was the credits, where they like erased Tabata from existence. Like beyond that, like they remastered the living shit out of this game.
It's kind of odd to say it, but it's like the Blue Point version of like a Final Fantasy.
That's exactly right.
This is the Dark Souls of the truest Blue Point Dark Souls Demon Souls remake that you could possibly get for a Final Fantasy game.
Now, now what that tells me is that whatever they're doing with the story, they did not feel it necessary to alter Crisis Core to match anything in Remake. It means that they have confidently included the events of Crisis Core Reunion in the Remake and Rebirth continuity since the beginning. What are your guys' thoughts regarding like lore? I want to start with Blitz. What did you think about the fact that this was a straight up remaster?
I was actually surprised because I was still like doubting it up until like as I'm getting towards the end. I'm like waiting for it. I'm like, where is it? Where is it? It's coming up soon, and it never came. I was surprised. But I did enjoy and thought that was pretty cool that they included a lot of the world aspects of like Remake into Crisis Core Reunion. Like they have the Mako radiation logo in the reactors. They took that's straight up from Remake that's in there, which is pretty cool. The Benora White Juice poster with the little girl holding the bottle.
Yeah.
It's the same exact poster from Remake, which is really cool. And some other like aspects of things like the Midgard plays and the music and the piano poster that's in Tifa's room. I believe I saw that in Reunion as well somewhere.
The Mad Bro poster. Yeah. Lots of stuff.
Yeah. I feel like that aspect, I thought that was pretty cool. So it sort of like kind of made me think, okay, maybe there's more to this, right? Maybe we'll come across some other stuff. But when you in private told me that about like Stamp, I'm like, all right, that's interesting. That they just full on like did not implement that at all, or like scrubbed its existence entirely I was like, okay, so what exactly is going on here now? So as I'm playing through it, I'm only noticing like subtle differences and changes. Like one line that comes from the top of my head, in the training scene with Sephiroth, Genesis, and Angel, when Genesis is charging up that big blast, Angel grabs his hand, and normally in the original one he says, "Stop, you'll destroy us all."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But they changed
Destroyed
it to, "Yeah, stop, you'll destroy this place," which
This
is like
place, yeah.
makes much more sense. I thought in the
Yeah.
original when I first heard that, I was like, "What the fuck would he say that? Like,
Yeah.
he ain't that strong. You ain't cutting cannons with one hand using the sword."
Yeah.
Yeah, Sephiroth's like, I'm good.
Genesis.
He can do whatever he wants. Yeah.
All
But
right.
I think it's still like, regardless of the fact that we don't have direct connections to Remake in that sense like that, it is pretty interesting to see how hard they worked towards not over extending into that
Mhm.
area. It kind of makes me wish there was like some kind of like behind the scenes like video of them like working on this and like just hearing them talk about stuff like, like the like other game developers do,
Mhm.
because it's a pretty specific direction that they told them to go with.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I would, even when like I knew you had already beaten it, and I'm like getting towards the end, I'm just like, there really isn't anything else at all. Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, I
Dude, the thing that I
overall I
thought,
wasn't.
I was like, okay, it's got to be hidden somewhere. And then when I saw that hard mode Minerva was the most unobtainably difficult boss, I was like, there's got to be dude, this is where the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is. And then nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
I
Yeah.
was actually very disappointed that Stamp was removed from everything, right? Because I feel like Stamp was like an almost effortless thing that they could do to make you feel a bit more continuity between this and Remake. And I mean, they went out their way to do much more difficult things to reinforce that continuity, like making sure that they photoshopped the Buster Sword in all the pre-rendered scenes, because they didn't re-render those, you guys.
No.
They were AI upscaled, so they had to meticulously
Every frame,
photo
yeah.
edit every frame that the Buster Sword was in, one by one. And then they also had to replace the Buster Sword in the game and not use the original. They went through and re-rendered all the summons so that they match Remake, but no Stamp. And I think that there was probably some intention behind that too, to not really
They know
reveal.
Stamp is the key.
Right, they know Stamp is the key, right? So they didn't want to do that. Basically, they kind of wanted to point us in whatever the right direction is, and that required not having the Buster Sword have a gold hilt, because if that Buster Sword had a gold hilt, oh my God, we would be on here talking theories about timelines and all kinds of other nonsense
Mhm.
that probably are completely off base. Think about how much money they had to spend to have literally, again, have a guy completely change the sword in every single frame, right? And go through all of the renders of Zack, which they did not re-render yet again. They just photoshopped them, meticulously doing all of that just so that it didn't point anyone in the wrong direction with where Remake story is going. I find that really curious, but I was kind of disappointed that there wasn't any Stamp, just because I would just feel like that's like the simplest thing that you can do to really give those two continuity. And now it makes me feel almost like Stamp is just kind of like this thing that almost magically appeared within the context of Remake. So that kind of makes me, you know, another thing too that was kind of touched on earlier was that that this game is untouched for the most part with its story, in order to, because it's already in continuity with Remake, right? So
Right.
Remake
Mhm.
looked back at Crisis Core and said, "This is where we want to go," or more than likely, they probably had ideas about remaking Final Fantasy VII back during the development of Crisis Core, because they were definitely thinking about that back then. With the way fan pressures were, the tech demo that they had put out maybe 2 years prior to the release of Crisis Core. So they were already thinking about remaking Final Fantasy VII back during that era, right? And according to, I believe Nomada has even explicitly said that he was that he was thinking about it back then at that time too.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I think that, and I've said this from the very beginning, and people always look at me weird when I say this, is that I don't look at Final Fantasy VII Remake as a remake of Final Fantasy VII or even just a sequel to it. I see it as a sequel to Crisis Core,
Mhm.
and not not like a remake of OG or even a sequel to. I see it as
Mm,
they wanted to sequelize what they started in Crisis Core.
I
And
think
that's
I
a
think
statement
that's
that a lot of people do not like.
absolutely the way to look at it.
Well,
Like,
yeah.
I think
Well,
everyone's
yeah.
like, is it a sequel? Is it a requel? Like, is it a requel sequel? I
Yeah.
fucking like the way that you said it is the way
That you've
they
said it several
100%
times before.
approached it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
really
think like
really on point.
Yeah.
I think the cool thing, like what I got right away from it is that, and I think Nomura said this in an interview, and it actually like freaked a lot of people out. He said essentially, like, for Remake to work and for that ending to be like, whoa, what's going on with Zack? Like, you have to maintain the original ending, which
Right.
where he dies, or otherwise it's like, wait, are you just expecting people to have played the PSP? Like, where are we getting a PSP in like 2022? You know, and they're like, watch it on YouTube or something. That's ridiculous. So I like that
Right.
they're like respectful to the modern people. For again, like Aaliyah's never seen that, and I was playing it with her, so like she saw that ending and was like, whoa, and it opened up a lot of like first time things for her and a lot of new knowledge. Same thing with the Nibelheim incident. So that was really cool to kind of see unfold. But I think it has to be that for Remake to make
Be
sense. And then,
significant.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah, and then whatever happens at the end of Remake and stuff, it's cool that again you'll have this whole saga where you can go back and see like, okay, this is what happened to Zack, this is what changed, what's going on here, and then we'll be able to fully understand it at the end. But it's just super cool, I think, and I think it's as far as I've always looked at the Remake situation as a revision of
Right.
the entire compilation, and including original FF7, and say, okay, we have all these other aspects, we've added lore, we've added Loveless, all these cool things. We want to expand on these characters. Let's do it. But this time it's all one project. It's not, a movie, an old PS1 game that looks nothing like this Crisis Core game that looks nothing like this other game. So
Right.
that's my look on it. And I think now it's like even more consistent, like the visuals and stuff, which is just so important. I feel like, imagine if you were watching Game of Thrones season 1 and then season 2, it was like polygon people. And then season 3, it was like, it is a very hard thing
you're
to
like,
follow.
oh shit.
Yeah.
And,
So that's kind of my view on it.
Exactly. And so to clarify too, so several interviews have prior to the release of Reunion have clarified that the ending of Crisis Core does not contradict the events of Remake and Rebirth and the Remake trilogy, meaning that it will be explained later. Like he even says why they don't contradict will be explained later. And so if you look at the end of Remake, it very clearly telegraphs that the way Zack's fate unfolds is in stark contrast to the way it unfolds in Crisis Core, right? And that's only valuable to know if you know how Crisis Core's, ending occurs. Like it's only a disparagement. It's only a contrast if you have the context of how things are supposed to be and why them being different is alarming to a good portion of the fan base. Now,
he just made it a little bit further to Midgar.
right, he just made it a little bit further.
That's right.
Just,
Yeah,
just a little
just-
bit further. They gave him a few more inches, man. That's
they
all.
gave
still
him
don't
a
get it.
completely different kind of afterlife. Like, sure, at the end of Crisis Core, he's lovingly embraced by Angeal, but in Remake, he's just dead in a different way for no good purpose. So obviously, like, it's pretty clear that we need to know why this is a shock. We need to know why this is different. And we know that at the end of all of this, it'll make sense why they don't contradict. Now, there are only a couple of ways they don't contradict. One of them is that we have been just bold-faced lied to by what we've seen. Like we are being shown a dream or an extended afterlife, or some event in the future creates a continuity shift, right? Like those are really our only two options. Or it's like a, like a complete developer oversight, like a Getty Images style thing, but over the course of 4 games. Those are kind of like where we're probably going with the game, and I think Crisis Core Reunion really nails down that this was Zach's story. What do you guys all think it is now? What is Zach's story moving into Rebirth? And I'm going to start with Sleepezi.
You're putting me in a position here.
Yeah,
you're
it's called
not-
doggy style. I'm just playing.
Damn style.
So that's a really good question, and it actually kind of harkens back to what I was going to say about the stamp thing. To what Ryan was mentioning, the disappointment of not seeing it. I think that there's a very, very good reason why it's not there. Not from necessarily like a big brain lore perspective. I actually think it's more to the point. It would, and for lack of a better term, it would have been way too on the nose to present
A
it that
dog
way.
term, really? Really?
Yeah. Exactly. I
Yeah.
think it would be way
Yeah.
too clear at that point
Yeah.
what the initial takeaway of that, like if it was paired with dialogue or a specific scene, I think it would have been overplaying it, and I think
Mystery
Crisis
would have been
Core
over.
already.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have overplayed itself. And the other thing I don't want to like go like super far into this because I can go off on this, but Crisis Core is already so intentionally telling you exactly all you need to know about the game. I think the reason Crisis Core exists is to the reunion one, at least, and the reason why it's been brought back is sort of what we've all been saying, is that it's supposed to, and like Clark was getting to the point of, is that it's supposed to stand in complete contrast to what we know from Remake's perspective. Everything is in contrast to what we see in Crisis Core Reunion. The themes are the same, and that's the consistency. Is that we're supposed to learn from what Crisis Core has developed and use that to understand why things are different. Why are things? It's not just Zach's fate that's the issue. It's what is the story being presented in this game that stands contrast to what we understand to be happening in Remake. What do we understand of the original game? What do we understand of the journey of the characters and all of these things? I think that very intentionally, and kind of getting to the point of the question, is that it is supposed to be Zach's story. Crisis Core has always been Zach's story. That's the story we needed to know and experience through him for this next game. And then OG is the journey of Cloud. And I think Remake is also the journey of Cloud. I think that they're just very, very different journeys. Specifically, I think that Remake will stand in stark contrast in a lot of ways to what people are expecting from like OG perspective, sort of narrative structure in this particular instance. But I think at the same time, while completely different, it will be also hearkening back to a lot of similarities. I think that's even though as vague as that statement is.
So what happens to Zach?
Actually, I do think that Zach is in, for lack of a better term, very dislodged. Because one of the things that we see in the one thing that Rebirth really clarifies, now having experienced Reunion, is that one of the things that that Zack says at the end of Crisis Core Reunion is that, hey, do you think that I became a hero? From our perspective, or from the narrative perspective, there's some sort of resolution to coming to this point, even in death. In the Rebirth trailer, there is a huge amount of there's something else being set up. He feels like he's failed to some capacity. So in that sense, there is something, now that something has changed, the character's sort of purpose has also shifted.
Right.
And what that is sort of up for grabs for whatever that leads into Rebirth. So I think it's very, very interesting to see the character being portrayed in such drastically different ways.
I
And that
think we
Rebirth
have
trailer.
we have to ask ourselves, like looking at a character arc, right? We have to ask ourselves, what is Zack's character arc, and what is the ending for Zack? And I think to use the epic poetry language, he has his kleos aphthiton at the end, his glory, and he does become a hero. But like I hinted at earlier, it's this very somber revelation of being a hero isn't what I thought it was. He wanted to be a hero his whole life, and he does become a hero. But what is truly being a hero? It's dying protecting your disabled friend who can't defend himself, fighting an endless army of people who are supposed to be on your side, who've turned against you. It's just this, like, for someone who's so powerful and so untouchable essentially in the entire game, it's just like this, incredibly mundane ending, right? But that's what a hero is. This meaningful action of defending a man who can't defend us. Like Cloud, person who, and Cloud isn't like his Angeal. He's not like a lifelong mentor or anything. He's just this guy that he knows for a little bit, and he decides, like, yeah, it's worth dying for this guy, because like that's what a hero is. So I think we have to ask ourselves, what does that mean for his arc after it? Because he essentially reached like enlightenment in his life, that's all he was obsessed about, right? And he achieved it, and he knows what it is to be a hero, but then he dies. So if he's alive, he has this knowledge. Cloud clearly does not have this knowledge, right? What it means to be a hero.
Yeah.
With his arc, like, is he gonna relay this to him in some way? This in sort of enlightened state, because he's become so powerful, Zack, as well. I'm curious what you guys think too. I thought a lot about power scaling throughout this game, having played for the first time, and it's like, okay, how powerful is Zack compared to Sephiroth, compared to Genesis and all these people? Obviously, he beats Genesis, but Genesis was degrading. That's very clear, and he's not at his best. Sephiroth, he does not beat Sephiroth. Sephiroth destroys Zack at one point in Nibelheim near the end. Angeal is pretty messed up, kind of decides to die when he fights Zack anyway. He doesn't really want to be part of this anymore. So we can't really mark that in the power scaling grid and everything, right? So I guess what I'm saying is, where is Zack if he survives and he's at this like full powered heroic state at the end and everything? And what does that mean for his character? It's interesting, but I think we have to look at it as a character arc. And if you're a writer coming back to this character, what does he have left to do? Certainly endless possibilities what you could do with this character, right? What does he have left to do? I guess it depends on what else you change in the story.
I think
right?
That's the perfect way to see it, is that what might have been accomplished in the original story is what was meant to be done. That was ultimately the goal. So to not achieve,
right,
I think
to fail
to fail there is the point of his. So there's I'm just gonna say fuck it.
That's the answer.
Go into this a bit. Is that Sephiroth, because there's two definitions of a hero in the story. Sephiroth is the definition of hero to everyone. But the truth of the matter is that he has no true honor himself. He is a pawn and a literal, like, constructed mask by a company to essentially fool people into thinking that their cause is good. He is the mask to the corporation. And it's very clear when looking through like even like his bio that like Sephiroth doesn't have any sort of personal desire or goal or dream when it comes to his character. He doesn't feel like he's grounded in any sense of purpose. He is essentially told that he's special from birth, and he starts to believe that fact.
This
And
is where the
then
second soldier comes in.
yeah, that's right. And then when you look at Angeal, his point is that his only dream, which first of all, he has a dream, to be this selfless hero and wield the Buster Sword to save the helpless. But both of those characters end up faltering. Sephiroth continues to live, obviously, even past the Nibelheim incident. It's always Sephiroth. He's always this image. He is this image to everyone. He is this image to Cloud. He is this image to Genesis. He's this image to all of these people as to what a hero is defined by. But the humanity of that is lost. Angeal represents the humanity in the heroism, but to a fault, because even Angeal, like you've already mentioned, he falls apart at the end of the story. He literally cannot carry the weight of his own ideals, and that's what the Buster Sword is. The Buster Sword is the ideal form of a hero, personified, like in object, and that is what creates the legacy of the story of what a hero is that it's not actually meant to be carried by one person. It is meant to be passed on to inspire. And what Zack ultimately accepts at the end is he's actually not supposed to be, there's no person that should ever be the hero. There is no one person that embodies all of these traits. But through a legacy of a story, through inspiration, you create this ideal hero. Sephiroth only thinks of himself as the hero. Zack wants to be the hero and realizes what he must sacrifice. And essentially what that is like his own life to create that legacy, that he is a part of the chain that will eventually birth this the right thing to do. Like he might not be able to find the answer, but maybe if I pass this on, somebody else will. And that's why it's so important that he gives this, that he dies, that he sacrifices himself for Cloud.
And I agree.
Off.
I agree. We all agree that that was his purpose.
Right.
What is it now?
Now he doesn't have a purpose.
He failed.
Was not able to pass. Yeah, he wasn't able to pass on that story. He wasn't able to pass on his own legacy to Cloud. Now Cloud and Zack make it through. Now Cloud doesn't maybe get the same impression onto him as Zack was meant to leave. So what is the impression that's left on Cloud at the end of Remake, having been impressionless, is Sephiroth's legacy. That's the legacy that Cloud is now taking on. So rather than it being OG, the legacy of Zack passed on to Cloud, it's the legacy that Sephiroth is imposing onto Cloud in order to carry that to the end. It's all a story, and that's what it says at the beginning of the trailer for Crisis Core Reunion is that it says a legacy that created Final Fantasy VII.
Right.
It's talking about the OG. It's talking about the OG Final Fantasy VII was Zack's legacy passed on to Cloud.
Right.
Remake is the alternate version of what happens when that goes wrong.
And even in Advent Children, it shows that spot, where the flowers grow. And what is said of that spot is that this is where a hero's journey began.
Yes, exactly.
And
exactly.
if that's different, what does that mean? So yeah, that's all good stuff. I do want to hear from Blitz and NSP on this.
So what was the question? Zack's legacy going forward?
What do you? We know how that ended. We know, but what do we think Rebirth, Remake. It's a trilogy. Zach's clearly got some kind of role. What do we think that's going to look like?
It just seems like weird for them to bring him back just to kill him again, but I can't see any I can't see any possible story outcome where he survives
Makes it to the end.
makes it to the end. I don't see any reason for that, any point for that. I mean, his character design is to die, to inspire others, and to be this like sort of tragic thing. So like when Remake sort of did what they did, I was kind of like, oh, what the hell? Or where could they go with this now? And that's when the whole conversation started to like spark up. Like, is he dead? Is this an alternate universe? Is it purgatory? Some shit.
Mm-hmm.
With Zach, I want to say like it's definitely going to change up a lot of things about Cloud, which will be interesting because Cloud has this like kind of like asshole nature background that's not even anything close to what his actual characteristics are like before being Mako infused. So what is he going to be like when they make it to Midgar? Like when he wakes out of his like Mako poisoning, is he going to be this like stoic, or like is he going to be like this badass, like, or is he going to be back to how he was before? I don't know. There's just so many. That's why I'm so like confused by their whole process of going forward with it. So it's exciting too, because I mean they clearly have a an idea and a direction that they want to take it in, but I just don't. Me personally, I don't see it working. If I could say that, like, it just I'm excited for it. I want to see it, but I don't know. I don't really know where they could take it, how they're going to take it.
It's pretty narrow, like
Yeah.
the things that can succeed. Ryan, what do you think?
Oh man, it's time for a very base but very disagreeable. Yeah,
Yay!
time to kill the mood again, bros. All right, so I think that, and especially considering CBU1's history, I think that the reason is quite obvious. Like, it is to bring Zach back to have a happy ending. I don't think that there is any other more profound reason. I think that there's a lot more to it than that. Obviously, it's not just like, yeah, he's back and now everyone. But I do think that that is going to be the end goal. And I just think that when you consider, the previous trilogy that this team just worked on, that this is probably going in that direction. And I think that there's nothing else you can do with Zach that would, if you re-kill him, that's just weird.
Yeah.
There's no way. There is nothing they could possibly do to make a more impactful death than the ending of Crisis Core, right?
True.
That's a great send-off for a character, and I don't think a very beloved send-off for a character too. And I just don't see any other way to kill him and it be more effective, right? Because if you bring him back and then he just does whatever arbitrary task that they have him there for, and you bring him back and then he does that, he fulfills that, and then it's like, and then he dies again, then it just feels like they just wanted to deliver more fan service for Zach just for a few moments.
Yeah.
Really quickly, specifically for you, NSP, because I think that this will be fun.
Go on.
I want to make. So I'm gonna explain my reasoning for it after, but I would like to make a bet with you about the remake series. And say that there's actually not going to be that. I don't think it's gonna have as happy of an ending in terms of the overall
I agree.
experience.
I agree. I'd put good
money
money on that.
I love you, boys. I love you, boys. Vehemently disagree, though.
Well, yeah,
and I know, and that's why
I think it will be the happiest ending humanly possible. Is what I
think that it's actually going to end up being
everybody's partying at the end, hugging.
Don't say that. Don't say it.
Well, but I'll also say this. I also don't think that. I also think that Rebirth is going to make it look more grim than
I
what it's actually going to.
I
Because
agree.
it's the
Yeah,
second part of a trilogy. So Rebirth is going to look really grim.
but
And at
he's
that point,
yeah.
everyone's going to be like, see NSP? Look how grim it was.
No,
Well, at the
no.
end of Final Fantasy 13 too, the world ends.
So
And everyone
here's my
like
point,
dies.
because I want to make sure that
Yeah.
we're both on the same page here, because what
Yeah.
I'm betting is going to happen,
Yeah.
and this is why I disagree, is that I think that they're betting that you have enough of a tie to the game of Final Fantasy VII to attack you essentially and to wound you way like in a much more profound way than it did in using, you know, the tactics that they used in the original. That's mainly where I'm coming from.
Mm,
So even if like things resolve themselves, because the original resolves itself, right? Like the game is ambiguous in ending that the
right.
world might be over, but
It's
to say
resolved.
that like
Yeah.
that's there's a feeling of conclusion there. What I'm saying to you is that maybe we will come to that same conclusion, but I think the things that will be lost and the actual like way that they're going to bring that to you are going to hit you harder than the way that they went to through from the beginning. I don't think that they're going to be doing it the same.
I can't
I'm
see
saying
it.
is that they're going to
Yeah.
use, like, for instance, like let's
Yeah.
just say this. Like if they, because a lot of the people talk about this is that like they think that they'll go through this maybe a similar way with like Aerith, right? But how do you make that ending better? How do you make that as effective, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think most of us would agree that you can't. So thinking about it that way, would they remake that same way in the way that would be effective, or would they choose maybe a different way to maybe approach the subject now that you've learned the lessons from like Final Fantasy VII? Now that we've already pulled that punch, maybe we couldn't do that the same way, or maybe even at all, and maybe do something else. Would
Okay,
like
bets
as
on the
and I
table.
know that
Like
you're
specifically though, like what does that like mean? Like
well, I
what does
can't.
that
I don't
entail?
want to because I don't want to.
Right.
I don't want to sway you. I'm making a bet here.
Right.
I just want you to
Right.
be intrigued enough to,
Right.
to
Yeah.
make
Yeah,
this for me.
Yeah, he doesn't
I
know either.
understand what you're. I understand like what you're saying hypothetically, like intellectually, right? Like I can agree with you, but I think that when I look at both the history of the team and how you could put this together as a narrative, their options are extremely limited. And while maybe you can make some stuff hit harder, you're probably going to be doing that at the sacrifice of other things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so,
totally.
All right.
let's talk like with Zach. I'll be brief on this. With Zach again, if they re-kill him, right? It feels weird. It feels arbitrary. It feels like you brought him back just for a few more scenes, fan service, and then you re-killed him. And if you let him live in the happy ending, everyone seems to be against that. So then, what is the middle ground between you let him live? And people thought like, oh, that's too happy ending. It's too unrealistic. That's not grounded enough. Or what's the other that he lives for a little bit longer? Just
Well, listen,
to have
it's got to
Yeah.
be in the details, right? It's got to be in between that. Like we can say, like, okay, point A, point B. There's only a couple options. I get like this, that he lives, he dies. But like, was there meaningful scenes there? Was there stuff that made you think, was thought provoking, that was emotional to you?
Sure, arbitrarily, yes, but the bigger picture though feels really pointless.
I
is
think
what I'm
it's
saying.
really hard to do the math on this kind of stuff, right? So
Right.
so when you so my perspective is okay. I don't think I've made it too much of a secret. I don't really like Zach's character. I don't think Crisis Core made that better. I think Crisis Core Reunion is selling me on a possibility. I think the most exciting thing that I've heard happen to Zach's character, because all he was is he was a piece of a puzzle. He was a piece of the steps that took that made Cloud's identity in the original. Okay, but in Crisis Core Reunion, he was like this. He was this bizarre, opaque narc that was somehow lovable, whose whole role was to sacrifice himself. Like, it was a very flat character. The most interesting piece of characterization Zach has got in the entire compilation is the line that he says in the trailer for Rebirth. I failed you. Finally, the dude's a human now. Finally, he is an interesting character. Finally. I think the most cruel thing that you can do to Zack is let him live. Let him live knowing that he failed to protect Aerith. I think that is a sadder story overall. I think if he witnesses Aerith dying, that's a sadder story. So it's hard to do moral math in a storytelling perspective like this over that. So I really think that that's the direction that they're leading this to. What is the thing that could make Zack interesting? Breaking him and seeing what happens to a good man when he's broken. I think that's more interesting than him becoming like, because every character has had this, like Final Fantasy VII is a story of orphans and how orphans deal with their pain. And we get all these different characters that are orphaned, and we get to see them change as a result. We see the way that, Sephiroth deals with his, bizarre parentage. We get to see what happens when, Cloud loses his parent. We get to see what happens when Tifa loses his, her family. Barrett, everybody, even Kate Sith, Reeve. We get to see kind of what happens to these orphans as they develop and come into adulthood. To all these different, and there's all these different ways that a character can react to that. It would be really interesting to see what happens when a character as opaque as Zack breaks.
Right.
Yeah,
and that's what they have to do, right?
Yeah, we talked about it earlier. It's like, he wanted to be a hero the whole time, and then that's what I think is a super compelling way to continue his arc. Like I was saying, he realizes, oh, this isn't this like kind of hyped up cool thing to be a hero, like whatever image you had of Sephiroth, right? It's like, because he says you're not the only hero, he wants to be like him, right? It's like, oh, this is not glamorous. This is just like you sacrifice when you gotta, and you fight for people who are weaker than you and stuff. What happens when, like Cloud, like Sephiroth, had a great talk with Sean Chiplock about this, voice of Nero, their identity is not what they thought it was. Let's add Zack to that mix, right? It's the same thing. He thought he was a hero, say if Aerith dies, whatever, like all of a sudden he's not. That's interesting from a character perspective, right? Like what happens to him then? Just like Baby Seal said, man, that's a complex character. It's like, how's he going to deal with that? This guy who's like a puppy dog, happy-go-lucky, realizes his entire world, his whole life mission has failed, and that's super compelling. So I would love to see that, and I think it's definitely a way to continue it.
Yeah, it's where things have to go, right? Because
yeah, for sure.
If you bring Zack back and he's just, I guess, in like the same cheery, happy-go-lucky self that he would normally be, there has to be obviously a new character arc for him, and it has to be something that is probably a lot more deeper and darker, and something that would allow him to live. Because again, I think the worst thing that you can do is just sort of like kill him again in like a sort of, he's not supposed to live in Final Fantasy VII checklist, right? Because I feel like that's just like, yeah, like he's supposed to die in FF7. Well, if you already diverted the story, then there's no point in trying to preserve that sort of thing, right? Just tell the new story you want to tell. Or tell what feels more organic, I should say, for that new story, rather than, well, this is Final Fantasy VII, so Zack has to die. Well, you already brought him back, so you already brought him back, right? So you can't just. So for me, it would honestly be worse if Zack redies, and I know that a lot of people have like cheered, like, oh, Zack should just die again. If he's back, leave him back. because there's no way you're gonna top how he died before. And
I mean,
I almost-
unless it's like, I think they could do it if it's very later. Like, yeah, if he shows up for one scene, just dies, that would be ridiculous. Or he, like, says
Part of
something,
me-
just, or, like, does one, like, but
it
yeah,
would have to
picture
be
it's,
like the end of the
games
trilogy,
later.
right? It'd have to be
Yeah.
like that far out in order
That's
for
what
it
I mean,
to be
like-
like, yeah.
Yeah, imagine that, and then we've kind of like grown to accept him back, and it would, he's had more screen time than he did in Crisis Core. Like that's what I'm trying to picture is like, I you
So-
gotta have, yeah, I'm trying to have faith in the storytelling differences of Crisis Core. Like the
Right.
fact that we like Zach with like this old, very short, weird script, right, is very impressive. Just like I said with Genesis, it's super interesting. Picture if we were to bring Zach to life in the way we're picturing for Genesis, like a very one note character who we
Right.
still liked just because of the new performance. It's like,
Yeah.
man, there's a lot of potential there. So I'm picturing like,
Right.
I think me included and all of us here, we're too married to the old game, and because we love it, like we grew up with, of course we do.
Yeah.
It's very hard to picture like anything being compelling at all, right? So I'm trying to just get my head in the, okay, like there's some really interesting scenes in Remake that are totally new, like really cool character moments, like the stuff with I always say this stuff with Tifa and Cloud, the stuff with Barrett and Cloud, the stuff with Aerith. Like there's so many cool little scenes that are just like human. Give me human stuff for Zach. That's not like I want to be a hero. And
Just
man, I
as,
will
like,
be
kind
so
of-
happy.
kind of a segue almost, like I think like as a good example of like what you're talking about is like, especially with like Crisis Core's weirdness, you
Right.
like a lot of those themes and the discussion in that game feel very out of touch, like to the character, like character stuff, like being driven specifically by that, or that the characters themselves are so almost like just thematic stand-ins for themes than actual people at certain times,
Definitely.
at least when it
Yeah,
came to
definitely.
the original. As a moment of connection for Remake and sort of the direction that seems to be the game seems to be taking, like the discussion in Crisis Core is about the hero that we've been talking about. It's the discussion of Loveless, it's the discussion of the roles that we play and everything like that. In Remake, there are a couple mentions of Cloud being this hero because it's directly tied to one of the most important elements of Cloud's character, which is the promise that he makes to Tifa, and that he will be that role for her. He will come and save the day at some point. That's the promise that he makes. And in Remake, she constantly foreshadows that. She is like, in order for you to play the role of the hero, you got to get better at doing this stuff. So what they're doing is they're taking that language and they're plugging it into the heartstrings. They're literally surgically tying these things in so that when eventually when things really start to matter for us because we care about these characters, we don't give a fuck about like we might want to see Genesis and Angeal, but if like fucking Angeal's head got like swooped off, no one's gonna be crying over that over Aerith, right? So like when it really comes down to OG's story, they're gonna start fucking with us by using it through the characters that we care about, and they're gonna start using the language of Crisis Core to build that up. And just as
Yeah.
like a level 11, whatever the fuck you want to call it, big brain thing, my forecast is that sort of how Clark was saying, like this is where like a hero died. I think that what's gonna end up happening is it's gonna be Zach standing over Cloud's grave saying that about him rather than it be the other way around. I think the sacrifice that's gonna end up being made is gonna be Cloud's sacrifice rather than Zach's. The toll that Zach took is now up for grabs, in my opinion, and somebody else is going to have to fall on the sword at some point, or somebody fall with, you get my drift with.
To
the
me, it
analogy.
always made a little bit more. I talked to Clark about this before, but I always felt like a lot of these things that keep on happening, like especially even like after like Final Fantasy VII story, just are directly involving Cloud. Like these things keep coming back for him. Sephiroth keeps coming back for him. He wants he's it's like the Goku effect, right? As long as this person exists, horrible people will keep coming and try to like ruin the lives of others. So I just feel like one of my possibilities is that Cloud dies at the end or at some point in the story. He doesn't make it to the end because him surviving just keeps on bringing this negative energy around and just people trying to sort of like ruin the world and take it over and shit like that.
Hey,
It is
man, that would
definitely
go
one of the more
go well.
popular theories. Yeah.
Hey, it would go well with what we said earlier, like what I was saying about Zach, right? Like, you know, Zach became his like self-actualized hero and then died. Like, it'd be the same for Cloud, you know, after the live stream where him and Tifa kind of reconstruct his mind and stuff, and then he comes out and you know he's like super powerful. He does what he has to do, and then he dies. Like that'd be a cool mirror to Zach for sure.
I think
I think.
I'm very against the Cloud dying thing. I think it's I think it's a little over telegraphed right now. And you know, like the whole ending of Remake feels like if there's any misdirect, it's going to be about the fate of Cloud. That's, you know, kind of the way that I see it. I also think too that it would too aggressively undercut the concept, like the crux of Final Fantasy VII. You know, because he was robbed of his life. You know, like that's kind of the whole thing. He was robbed of 5 years. So, you know, we'd be killing a 16-year-old, and that's not like there's a tragedy which propels the core themes of Final Fantasy VII and ones that don't. And I think there's something more valuable about the last Cetra, you know, like the extinction of a species. And so, you know, I still really think that, you know, to kind of say where I think the moral math is going to line up is I do think that at the end of this, you know, we will have a few more characters that are alive. I think we'll have one more character that's alive. But he'll be very different. I do think Aerith will still die. But I don't think that at the end of this thing we'll think that this game was less sad somehow. I think
just like a Sugar and Rainbows.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a macabre feeling. But I do see a lot of merit in the, you know, Cloud dies at the end theory. Like it's probably the oldest, most persistent one.
Yeah, I agree in that. Like, what is kind of the message at the end of FF7? You know, beyond the kind of the nature and environmental awesome message is like, you know, what does it mean to live on? You know, after people who have died, who, you know, you should have protected, who you didn't, who you really screwed up, you actually harmed them. Like, how do you live with that guilt? How do you move on? How do you be happy? Right? Look at Advent Children. Like Cloud could have a perfectly happy life, and he's decided like he's so guilty he just can't do it. He can't embrace like Denzel and Tifa and Marlene. So he just can't do it. And at the end of that, he comes to terms with that. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of the message is living on, and you know, what does it mean to accept loss and deal with it? So I feel like, yeah, it would certainly change that message. It could be a different message, but I would like to see them explore that more, just with the acting and everything. Like, and that's kind of where my head goes. Again, just filmmaker obsession stuff. But when we talk about Zack being alive, Genesis, the list goes on, even Cloud and stuff we haven't seen yet, Sephiroth, etc. I want to see these scenes, man, that we've never seen. I want to see these characters interact, and I guess kind of to go off what Night Sky Prince was saying on like, oh man, if he just dies again, my head is trying to fill in like a humongous encyclopedia of scenes of like, we know Zack 10 times better than we did in Crisis Core, right? If that was to happen by the end or whatever else, and like real scenes with Zack, you know, not just like the kind of the exclamations of what he's doing and what his character is and reacting to crazy Angeal cells and everything, right? Like, imagine those scenes where he's just talking with Cloud, where he's talking with you know, whoever about what happened with Aerith, etc. You know, maybe Aerith is past, as we said. Those are the scenes that I think could make all this like totally shift in our brains and be like, oh man, okay, like I like the direction they're going, because I feel we're all a little too obsessed with just like the end, like the destination, not the journey, if that makes sense. Like, okay, how's it ending? And I feel the real good stuff is going to be in between.
Well, I mean,
if
to
they do it right,
clarify,
if they do it right.
my issue is with both.
Yeah, I hear that.
Sure.
I
To
hear that.
be a
Yeah.
little bit more clear, because again, it's like it's not just the dilemma of what do you do with him at the end? Do you kill him or not? There is
Yeah,
also
is it good, right? Yeah.
there is also a dilemma of the fact that Cloud is the protagonist because Zack dies, right? And with
Yeah.
with the existence of Zack around in any capacity, you have to then reevaluate why Cloud's even the protagonist, right?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
what does that mean
Well,
for
and
the characters and stuff?
that's really funny that you bring that up, because there
Yeah.
seems to be, from the literally the biggest manipulator ever at
Mhm.
the end of the game, stressing the sheer level of like universal importance that that Cloud somehow connects to the events of all of these
Right.
like super larger than life elements.
Right.
So you have to consider maybe that, like, maybe in that conversation, maybe this is like kind of also evaluating that same thing that you're talking about. Maybe the conversation that will open up is like, why is Cloud even a protagonist in this story? Like, what is the point of
Right.
this? Why is he being told all of this stuff that he's so tied to? Why does he matter so much? And what's the answer to that question? Whether it's like something really clever in terms of like, I don't know, him having the live stream sorted him or some shit.
I think
Who
it might be a
knows?
setup
But
for who ends up being the villain in or at least the final confrontation at the end of Rebirth.
Right.
yeah, for sure. And I think that that's one of the interesting aspects of this game is that I think, kind of like Genesis, somebody alluded to, there's like some 4D chess going on, I think, in terms of our perception of this game. I think that we're being led to believe a lot of things have happened, and I think that because we don't have the entire trilogy in context, we might not be able to see exactly what is going to be the reality of the situation until we get there.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think
Yeah. So what are we doing here?
But yeah, again, yeah. Why are we talking about part 1 when the whole game isn't even out? But I agree with NSP on this, where it's like this game is going to be defined by the build up of context, the success of that context being properly executed to ultimately come to some like pinnacle, of just perfection of all of these things linking together and making us like, because at the end of the day, like, one of the things that is a big question about this remake is, why the fuck are we doing this way?
Yeah.
Why
Because
did we
either
decide
way,
to do it this way instead of the traditional route? And it's like, it could ultimately not be worth it for a lot of
Right.
people. And I totally get that. So for me, I've always been on the side of the compilation in terms of like, there's some shit in there that I really like about the game in the context of viewing it through Remake, because of what you've said about it being like a successor of Crisis Core more than it is maybe of Final Fantasy VII. I think the thing that makes the compilation, though, regardless, is that Final Fantasy VII is the base of all of those. Whether they succeed in that or fail in that, that's totally like, they don't even come close. They don't hold a candle to the original. But I think that's the one aspect of the remake that is maybe being taken lightly, is that this still is Final Fantasy VII more than it is the compilation. It's just using the advantage of the language that it built
Agreed.
to
Yeah.
create the narrative
And the added lore. I agree 100%.
and the added lore. And I think, again, going back to this like stuff, because what we're sitting here talking about is like Final Fantasy VII with great characters, great story, all of this stuff that we 100% agree on is like just some like god tier levels of like storytelling that is really engaging. they're not unaware of that. They're going to bleed dry as much of that masterpiece and melt it into everything else as possible. Like as humanly possible, they are going to be doing that. And I think they've proven that in many ways just with the remake. I think rightfully so scared everybody shitless about like how this is going to end up.
Right.
All intentional in my opinion. So I'm way more
Yeah.
trusting of it from a Final Fantasy, like the original perspective.
Yeah.
That story is the thing leading all of this to where it's ultimately supposed to go.
Right.
I also
rather than the compilation dictating.
I also do agree too with NSP that very likely we're going to decide whether this landed or not in part 3, not part 2. I think
Yeah,
Rebirth is a very
sure.
easy win. Like I think
Yeah.
we're going to all walk away from Rebirth going, "Man, they empired that."
Yeah.
But it's
Yep.
how they
We
it's
see
how
our
they,
favorite locations and stuff,
yeah, it's how they Jedi this that's important.
Yeah,
Is it
totally.
going to throw up right before the finish line?
Yeah,
Is it going
exactly.
to
the
succumb
marathon.
to
Wouldn't be outside the
dehydration
realm of
and pass?
possibility.
Yeah. I expect Rebirth to be the most well received of the 3.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I agree
Easily.
wholeheartedly. I think
Yeah.
because even
It's definitely
if
going to introduce a
3
lot of
is
new
good,
elements.
Yeah,
what
like
and-
if
I
it ends up being great, it's still gonna be a resolution, and that is always criticized, like just
Yeah.
by default.
Yeah, definitely.
So
and
yeah.
and I do want to
That's
hear
kinda
from
sick.
Blitz on this a lot more. And so you said it's going to introduce. I heard you say over all the talk, under all the talking, it's going to introduce a lot of elements. What are some things that you think are going to be set up? Like, what are I like? Do you think you've mentioned Genesis? Do you think Genesis is going to be there?
I think so. When I look at the Rebirth logo and the way that it like animates across the screen at the end of the trailer, it just screams Genesis to me. And who knows? I mean, the in Bible terms, don't they use the word like Genesis to sort of talk about like the rebirth or like the reborn
Well, it's the first
of that
book.
type of
It's like
yeah.
the birth of like yeah. The Genesis story
Yeah.
is life being born. It is God creating life.
Yeah.
That's
And we got
Genesis.
Jesus in Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core now.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
All right.
like
All right. So this is true, by the way.
It's actually
This
true.
is
He's not
true.
good. He's not good.
The
That's the
image
thing.
Jesus weeps over Bethlehem, or a terrible AI recreation of it, does appear in the Nebel Mansion in Crisis Core Reunion. I wouldn't take a ton of stock in that, but it does, in fact, exist for sure, and it's certainly not
Don't
the
rule out
only
anything.
biblical reference. And I do want to say this too. Speaking of battle stuff, like one of the really weird things is there's this new feature called Buster Sword Proficiency, and it is the hardest thing to level up in all of Crisis Core Reunion, and it seems to mysteriously max out at 95%. And that does tie in, I
The
think.
Nomura-ism or not,
It's
we don't know, or a glitch, we don't know.
it's either that or, but I think
We'll know later. Yeah.
I think you've all kind of brought this
intended
up
mechanic.
that if it's intended, it's because the story of the Buster Sword cannot be
Not done.
completed. It's not done.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Mhm.
what are you excited for the most in, as a result of Crisis Core Reunion? Has this, like, has the experience of, like, I just saw Max Dude, like, post, like, is Crisis Core good now? And whatever. But, like, you know, getting to go through this, I think you and I, Blitz, have spent the most actual time on this game. Has this made you, like, more excited for Rebirth?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Without a doubt. It's made me upset that like Ever Crisis got delayed. It's just I want more. I want to consume more. I
Yeah.
want more of this these characters, this story in general, just to keep like to come out and be here for us to consume. Um Part of me like I did feel a little let down going into like Crisis Core Reunion because I was kind of hoping there would be some like extra elements towards Remake story like sort of like implemented in some ways there, and instead I just played through the story that I already knew, which isn't bad. per se, but I was kind of like I kept holding out hope until the very end, and then I got hit with that. But it does make me very excited for the future because it does show that they're taking a lot of things seriously. They're taking a lot of elements aside from like combat and shit. They're making sure that these characters are depicted in the best way that they possibly can depict them and
Yeah.
consistent too all across the board. So we're definitely seeing a lot of these characters we've been introduced to reappear in future iterations like Rebirth. Um, and some new ones also introduced for the very first time with like, Elena and whatnot. I think that when Rebirth comes around, by the time Rebirth comes around, we will have a lot more people on board. Essentially, that. I feel like that's their main goal because they want to make sure the sequel follows up with Remake and does well, if not better than what Remake did. And in order to do that, you got to kind of like tie up all the loose ends of like the weird confusion shit that you added, the element of like Zack at the end of Remake. So on a they're clearly looking at this from like all angles, and they're trying to sort of create a good roadmap going forward for the rest of the series. And I think that Rebirth, like you guys are saying, I agree too. I think it'll be the best of the series. And I'm excited. It's like it's going to introduce so many things. Hopefully, I mean the world outside of Midgar, getting to see what that looks like. We got a brief look at it in Crisis Core Reunion. That's what I spent most of my time looking at when I was walking around like
That was sick.
Gungaga, walking around Nibelheim. I kept going around in circles of Nibelheim, just walking around from like the different like screens,
Yeah.
just to like
That
I
was-
want to see
It was wild
more.
to see that.
What did they add in from like I guess that I can like see in Rebirth. I was a little disappointed with the Nibelheim Mountains.
I
thought
think-
they were gonna look
Yeah, I thought they were gonna look like Jagged.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, they're
I
saving
was-
that.
yeah,
Well,
they're saving
the
that.
thing is, like, and Blitz, of course, knows this. Is part 2 is going to be, some aspect of big open exploration. We don't know how big, or they said it's going to be not open world, but something in between. Right? Like that already is going to have a bigger appeal to a wider play base, and it's going to bring in more players to be like, ooh, what was that? I thought that was like a hallway simulator. And what's this? You can explore, you can do stuff. Looks like Genshin Impact. Looks like this other game. What's that? All of a sudden, it's like, okay, I'll go back and play the first one if I got it. Like, this looks interesting.
Yeah.
So they're probably going to get a much bigger appeal, and all of a sudden, it's like, oh, this is a big saga that expands. Okay, like it's something to invest in. And I think they'll probably get a lot of new people, and
Right.
a lot of old fans will still be like, shit, I said I'd never play this, but goddamn,
Yeah.
that looks fun. That looks like it's bringing back memories. I gotta go explore the world.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah, I see those people in my comments all the time. They're like, when they
Yeah.
broke my chest with Remake. When
still
Rebirth
see
comes
it.
in, I'm not gonna buy it. I'm like, yeah, okay. I'll see you in the comments for those videos too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for the engagement.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, and
Um,
I back to Reunion. Just before we get to audience questions,
Yes.
I do want to say, like, this was a excellent remaster, but it was a
Yes.
third party
Yes.
remaster.
Blue
It
Point.
was
Blue Point
one
remaster,
of the
yes.
best remasters I've seen. That being said, there were a bunch of missed opportunities that if one person from CBU1 had just gone and like sat with them like through the entire development, it would have been great. And I'm not just salty about Stamp. That's fine, whatever. I can be okay with that. But there were things like, for instance, the G Machinoids, like in the final dungeon in chapter 10, they really had an opportunity to make the G Machinoids look like the weird unknown entities in
Yeah.
in Remake, and that would have made sense from a lore perspective. But it was just remastered so ideally that they look like the same Machinoids that we expected. Like it was
Or,
really
like,
a
the
callback.
diabolical creation.
Yeah,
Like the diabolical creation would have been a perfect way to like sort of bridge that Machinoid.
exactly.
It's like, oh, this is like what they're gonna look like now. Like get us a little bit maybe
Yeah.
more excited about like those elements. But even then I feel like I almost want to be saved for that stuff. That's what I was
Yeah.
thinking the entire time
Yeah.
I was watching the
And-
Nibelheim incident.
And
in
I
this
don't
game.
want Rebirth to come out any later because CBU1 is busy like helping Tose make this game. I just want them, like, this is,
Yeah. Agreed.
please dedicate, like, do not make Nomura die. Like, like, he's been historically stretched thin, and I'm sure he, holds a little bit of responsibility for the position he put himself in. But, like, I think it's really important that CBU1 be working on the Rebirth project, and you let other people, and there's a distribution of resources and stuff like that you could criticize. But, I was pretty happy that, like, every time I would see, like, a Machinoid not be an unknown entity or something like that, I was like, at least I know what they're working on. Like, that was like a big happy thing for me. So,
well, that's what excited me
Yeah.
too. It's like what Sleepy just said, man, I want to save myself for that. Like,
yeah,
seeing Nibelheim was mind blowing, because I was like, just because they copy pasted, the Sephiroth model and the thing from, I'm like, oh damn, this looks amazing, holy shit. And it's got like I said this in my review, I'm playing with Aaliyah and she's like, this, like when Sephiroth's having his breakdown, it's just like this, she's like, this music does not fit at all. Like, she's never seen it. She's like, what the hell is this music? I'm just like, it's called Bad Direction by Tabata. See FF15 for horrible music use as well, like the song Somnus, etc. But yeah, it's like, what a weird choice. Like, this is like electronic music beat type song, and Sephiroth's like, oh, am I human? And it's like, what is going on? So, man, it's gonna be awesome in Rebirth when, this is still using the same shot selection as Crisis Core, by the way. It just looks so good, and the lighting is so good. We're like, man,
Yes.
that's legit. It's gonna be so much better. Totally new shot selection. Oh man,
You actually brought up a really good point with the music, and I notoriously just don't like. I don't like Crisis Core soundtrack for shit. I also don't like this one, even though it sounds way better than the original.
Yeah.
But one of the interesting choices that they did take was with Advent Children, and just this is a compilation perspective thing, is that in Advent Children they went with a much more electronic sound to capture this sort of alien sort of perspective that
Yeah.
Genova brings to the story.
Yeah.
And then you have, in contrast to that, you have Crisis Core, which is all very much just this acoustic slash
like rock,
very light stuff, very like just piano like melodies, and that's it, and maybe a guitar, and then you're just like, this isn't like, in concept this is great, in execution this is kind of garbage.
and it's like the same song over and over and over
Yeah,
again.
the
It
same
really is.
same guitar riff,
Dude.
the same. They
Yeah.
overuse Price of
Just-
Freedom
Yeah.
so fucking much.
Yeah,
And they
no,
know
yeah,
that that's the one
give
song.
me at least
yeah,
one
it's
more,
like every scene.
one more banger. Just one more banger would have just, like, at least I could use at
Yeah.
least 3 of the songs in a
This
video,
is-
and I can.
This is so
You play the game
unifying.
for
Guys,
hours.
I kid you not, I made a video today, and
Uh-huh.
I was using the tracks that Baby Seal ripped from the and none of the songs are named, by the way. They're like BGM
Yeah.
5, 4, 3, whatever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I'm going through and I'm clicking through these songs, and I'm like, which one
None
is
of
the
these.
fucking, like, I can't tell.
Yeah, you
They're
can't
all
tell.
exactly the same. So what
Yeah.
I did in my video, it's kind of subtle in the background, because some songs were too short for the video. Instead of doubling it up to like to extend the length, I actually overlaid songs on top of each other to just continue, and you can't even tell it's like 3 different songs that are playing. If you rewatch that
Like-
video, it's 3 different songs that I
funny.
put on the tracks.
I gotta
Yeah.
listen to
I-
that. But no, it's like
I
there's one
love-
song that's literally da-na-na,
Yeah.
da-na-na,
No, it's
over
the
and over again.
worst.
That's the entire song.
Down, down, down,
And it's
down.
like
Yeah.
20 hours in the game.
Yeah.
Oh,
This is I literally have like a 4-hour, like I like in a 4-hour edit, like the thing that saves you are tracks that repeat and are catchy. And
Yeah.
these fucking tracks are extended to shit. And I
Yeah.
can't choose any of these because it just I'm listening to it and I've heard this shit 100 times, and
Yep.
this shit is putting me to sleep. And I'm
I
like,
was doing the
this is-
soundtrack edit today for my review. Guess what I chose? Nobuo's song,
Remake.
"Anxious Heart" from Crisis
Oh,
Core. And I put that
there you
in.
go.
I was like, that's actually
What
Yeah,
a
like a song.
surprise that the one that
Yeah.
works is the original
Yeah.
original song.
It honestly might be my least favorite Final Fantasy OST. Not like,
Yeah.
well, yeah, actually, that I can think of, like, right out. It's
Dude.
probably like one of my. And I'm not necessarily saying that it's like terrible, But I am saying that like out of like in a series of like amazing music, it is probably in like the very bottom tier for me.
Dude, Mythic Quest has a
it's very
banger.
generic. It's very
Yeah.
generic, and a lot of the songs kind of sound
Yeah.
like they come off. I said this earlier in our Discord group that it's not like some of the songs come off as like Sonic songs to me.
Yeah,
But it's just
they
like
kind of do.
Yeah.
No, because
There's some bangers in
Sonic-
Sonic.
Sonic has some bangers actually.
Yeah.
mhm.
Like Sonic-
you gotta
Sonic-
respect it.
Yeah, I'm like, hold up
Yeah.
now.
Oh no,
Sonic,
I'm not
Sonic's-
trying to be like
Yeah.
Ishimoto
I'm not
is
trying to be like Afro
Ishimoto is
right
not a
now.
bad composer. He's not.
He's
Sonic is
not
the
a
shit
bad
compared
composer.
to
That's
this.
a,
He's
that's a
not
thing
well
too, right?
utilized in this game. That's what I want to
Yeah.
say. He's
Yeah.
not bad.
Because
Listen to like Your World Ends With You. He has some great songs.
Well,
That's
then
true.
you,
Yeah.
Suited to
Um,
this.
Type Zero.
Type Zero.
He's done some really
Yeah.
good OSTs, but like, man, when it comes
It's
to
Tabata, man. I'm telling you, it's
it's-
Tabata. He's just like
and like,
Well,
dude,
I don't
one of
know.
the problems, like even the tracks from the OG, the mixes of them are very vanilla and very dry. Like the battle
Yeah.
theme, it's like,
The only thing that is
Yeah.
keeping you awake is just the thought of how good the song was in a different game, and then when the ambience music, aka just the rest of the soundtrack
Yeah.
kicks in, it
Right.
just it actually it's so funny because even in the original Crisis Core, like it was so mundane, and I just was like, Jesus Christ, at least let me listen to something that isn't so like just as bland. I hate to
Yeah.
say it like that, but just like not horrible, but bland.
And
which is
like you
just the
said,
worst.
there's a thematic element that does somehow
It does.
fit.
That's the part of Crisis Core that like where like I forgive it is that there's
Yeah.
such pure intent in Crisis Core to make something that is so much better than it actually is that I respect it. Like from a film language, from an artist language, I respect it.
Yeah.
Does it work? Absolutely fucking not. Like it doesn't get quite there.
Yeah.
Reunion does a much better job of like framing that and
Right.
and emphasizing that.
Yeah.
But it's not in the original, it just kind of dissipates. So it's this, and the soundtrack completely reflects that.
Yeah.
So
And and I like my final word on Reunion is that like I think there's value in playing both the OG and remake. I think now Crisis Core Reunion is the only way you should ever experience Crisis Core.
Yeah.
never play it. Like
there's not any reason to go back. And
Right,
yeah.
if you want to take what you like from the original, that's like completely like moddable. Like you're not going to go back for the graphics. You're not going to go back for the soundtrack. You're not going to go back
definitely
for
not the battles.
the
right? Yeah.
combat. So it's there's no reason to ever revisit it. There's no reason, and good. That's exactly what this needed to do.
Yeah.
Is make it
Simply for
concrete.
the third person camera, because I was looking at my PSP just now and I realized there is no right analog stick on this
Yes.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, it's
so-
a bitch.
Now I'm remembering. Like,
You
oh my
use
God, I couldn't
L1
adjust
and
the
R1,
camera.
right, to move the camera
Yeah.
around?
Oh,
Oh.
no.
Oh god! And in
I know.
battle, wasn't it like fixed because you had to use L1 and R1 to switch your spells
Right.
and attacks and shit?
Yeah.
Oh no.
And you
Did I-
couldn't pan up. You couldn't look
This
up or
is
down.
completely off subject, but you know how I watched Advent Children was on the PSP. That was the
Whoa.
first
Dude,
time I
that was
ever
my-
watched it.
The first UMD
That's
I
crazy.
owned.
And it was like, what on earth is this like new emerging technology?
I
And
know.
now here we are where it's just trash.
Want to hear
Clearly the
something else
future.
wild about this game, about Reunion, is that when
Huh.
you unpack the files, the videos are in the same format as they were on the PSP.
Really? That's
They're
wild.
fucking out of their minds if they're if they're operating on that level. It's just like everything must be the same.
Well, I
even
mean,
the
this
file
was
type.
remastered from C+ to Unreal
right.
Engine.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of smart the way that they. This will be a masterclass in remastering. Like they
Isn't
did this
this
in such a
company known for
creative
this?
way. Like I'm really impressed with this company.
Damn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Didn't they do like a bunch of different ports for like Nier
Yeah.
or something? And okay, because
Oh
that,
no, they didn't
like,
do
it's
no. Yeah, they did. They do other ports, but yeah, they did the pixel remasters.
okay.
Yeah.
Very
Okay.
cool.
It is audience question times. You guys have been great, by the way. All of you are amazing guests. So I'm going to start with a question from Arsomnia, and it's about Genesis. Genesis easily invokes passions in one form or another. Tonight's burgeoning appreciation for his character, is it due to his vocal performance only, or perhaps also due to many fans being older now, being able to interact with the character now on a more critical, more discerning level? And I am going to answer that for me personally, it's just the voice. It's 100% the voice for me. What about everybody else?
I think it's the state of the world and the state of pop culture. Back when this came out, it was like everybody thought it was cool to hate absolutely everything. Am I exaggerating? Like that was just the
No,
like the
no,
thing.
you're
It's
right.
like,
I'll be straight up with you. Because I played this game. How I found out about Crisis Core, I came across it by accident. I didn't even know this thing existed. I was
Really?
hacking PSPs as a business in high school, and I was on this website looking at like what are the top games. So I'm like, this guy just like it's like I want like NES stuff, I want Game Boy Advance stuff, but also throw some good PSP games. So I'm like looking up like what's the top ones, and I'm seeing like Final Fantasy 7. What the hell is a Crisis Core? So I downloaded, boot it up, and I'm like, wait a minute, what? Like, why is Cloud on the front cover of this shit? I mean, not the front cover, but like in the promo for it. And I'm like, all right, let me check this out, right? So I played through the game, and I'm going through it. I absolutely hated Genesis, and it wasn't even like it wasn't even like I was on like a forum or anything like that. Just try to like dissect the character and see more of it. I didn't care enough to do that. I was just playing through it, and just right off rip, I was like, he's kind of like he seemed like he was cool. He has a cool looking design and stuff, but I just really could not like stand certain elements of it. And for me, now as I'm older, it really did come down to the voice and the certain delivery that the new actor was doing with certain lines, and the way that he didn't to me, the older Genesis kind of kept his voice at the same, it was like not monotone, but he kept it like at the same,
Same
I guess,
energy
frequency.
level.
everybody did that. The old
Yeah.
Sephiroth too. It's just like every word is the same exact note forever, and there's no emotion there.
Yeah, exactly. It was like there wasn't as much emotion. Like, what really caught my eye, like in the trailer, the recent trailer they put out, well, not the second or third trailer for Crisis Core Reunion, when he's telling Song, he called him like a Shinra lapdog. The amount of like oomph he put into his voice for that scene where he
Yeah,
throws like
that was good.
Fire Raga at his nuts, that was like absolutely. I was like, yo, what the? I was like, yo, it actually sounded kind of cool. And then going into it, I can honestly say, yes, I still do think Genesis is one of those characters that we don't see him by himself at all, because he spends all of his time reenacting what he's going to say to people by looking in the mirror.
He's rehearsing.
100%. I feel like he's
what you
that
see is what
person.
you get.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So but it's definitely the voice for me.
Yeah. His voice is great. I remember when I was like, oh shit, this is the first time I'm gonna see him. And I had this like kind of nostalgic expectation, like, oh, it's gonna be cool. Like, yeah, I remember this, like, man, 2008. I remember seeing these scenes when they came out, and like it was just not that at all. I was like, whoa, he sounds good. Wait, this is cool. Like he's actually delivering the lines in like a believable way, as if someone who was, saying these things might say, not this like weird, stilted, like inhuman way of speaking. And I thought he was cool, and I think something hit me then. I was like, wait, his design is cool too. Like it all just kind of cured in that moment. I was like, this is an interesting character. I want to see more on him. So I think, yeah, it's the voice is super heavy in that. But again, like I said earlier, picture it, with a better script in the future.
Ryan.
Okay, so for me, actually, because I was a J-Rock pilled weeaboo back when I first played Crisis Core, I actually thought Genesis was like cool as a teenager, because I was like, oh dude, he's Gax, and Gax music is amazing, and I listened to Gax music at the time. So for me at the time, I actually did have a better impression of Gact, and I thought he was like super cool.
Mhm.
It was really only later in life as I went and revisited Final Fantasy VII Original and really much more deeply understood that game and what it was about, and the scenes and the structure of a lot of the scenes, particularly the Nibelheim incident, and everything that transpires inside the reactor too. That's when I was like, okay, so I'm not really as much of a fan of Genesis, right? So actually, not liking Genesis's character as much came from getting older and maturing for
Mhm.
me, and not like me going back. And then we have Crisis Core Union and this playthrough that I've done recently. Again, it's entirely the voice actor. The voice actor, again, like as Clark had kind of pointed out, does deliver some lines that are really well and that allow you to sort of empathize with the character a little bit more and feel his character. And then part of that also too, I guess, is trying to reanalyze it and figure out which characters are which. So he did improve again due to the voice actor, and a little bit, I'd say like maybe like 10 or 20% of it was me going back through it and kind of like reassessing him and his reaction to Shinra versus everybody else's reaction to Shinra, which I feel like Genesis's reaction was probably the most logical. And out of all the characters in Crisis Core, I probably now think that Genesis probably is one of the better, if not the best, because the presentation, right, of those characters.
Mhm.
Not that he's the best character, not that Genesis is better than Sephiroth or Cloud or
Right.
anything like that. But the presentation of all the characters, Genesis probably is the most interesting now that I look at it. But then I can't really say that overall that like I'm still like fanatically like in love with Genesis. But again, the voice actor added a lot, and I don't think age perspective really has mattered much on it so much as what they've done to change, and also the fact that if I'm separating Final Fantasy VII OG, right, which I look at is like this sort of complete masterpiece that needs nothing else added to it, versus when I look at this as a part of Final Fantasy VII Remake, a very fun AAA game that I quite enjoy, but I don't quite have the same feelings of like this is a masterwork, right? That I do about the original. It's a lot easier pill for me to swallow, right?
Mhm.
Whereas like they're shoving this guy, they're retconning my original complete masterpiece to put this guy in it, versus like this is this new FF7 thing that you're
Right.
doing, and it's just part of that, right? So
Right.
it's
So
just
the
because of the
impact it
way they're
has,
accepted,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
yeah.
Sleepezi, Genesis' first love.
At first sight.
I think he's muted.
Did we lose him on the Genesis question?
He's muted. It was too much room.
My response to about Genesis killed the Sleep Easy. I am so sorry, chat. We will never know what that 4-hour theory video is going to be about.
That's fine. Okay. Well, I know him well enough. Genesis is
I'm back.
the crux
Sorry.
of Final Fantasy VII,
I'm
and
sorry.
I'll be back in 1 second.
it's so good and smart, and now it's even better, and we're all in.
Genesis is
I got it
crux
for
of
you.
Final
You're
Fantasy
okay.
VII.
I'm gonna just go ahead and just really quickly say, because it's a short answer, the performance did nothing new for me whatsoever.
Right.
And
Right.
so everyone is impressed with the voice. I think it makes no difference to me, and I
Oh,
still
that's
I like.
surprising. I thought it doesn't make you like him more.
No, I actually don't have any opinion about the new voice that is
Hmm.
strong enough to even like really consider. So
Right.
That's
the
fair.
character's the same, and I like the character in terms of what he represents. And
Yeah.
then that's it.
Yeah.
So the answer is nothing has changed for me really when it comes to him. So that's it.
Okay, so that does lead us to a good follow-up question by subtext, which is, now that we've all universally agreed that Gact-inspired character Genesis is the best part of the entire remake anthology, what do we see that his role will be moving forward? And I am very curious right now, as of this recording, Sleepezi, how do you think Genesis logically intersects with the future of the remake trilogy?
Genesis, I've changed my opinion quite a bit since I think anyone has actually like last heard me talk about him. But the one thing I would say is that I think Genesis has already done what Genesis needs to do in the story. I actually don't think that what Genesis will be in the sequel will be that impactful in terms of the overall story. I think Genesis already has said enough, and what he's done explains a lot. And that's where his importance lies. Is it's not what he will do, it's what has already happened that will be the importance of his character. And I'm not saying that it's like he's the one responsible for all of this nonsense. It's not that. It's literally the example that Genesis has shown us of somebody coming to find acceptance in something. It's how Genesis's journey resolves that is the meaning behind Genesis's point as a character. Again, going back to it, like a lot of these characters, the three friends specifically, are like pillars of thematic representation just physically. And Genesis is maybe the most human of the characters, even though his presentation is so over the top theatrical. His journey is ironically the most human experience of the three friends. And the example that comes to, and the conclusion that comes to, is that Genesis was able to sort of choose a path, to redefine a path for himself rather than accepting his fate. One of the things that Genesis as a core to his character is that he is in conflict. He is in conflict with Shinra. He is in conflict with the norm, essentially, which is Shinra as a company sort of overtaking the world, down to literally his biology conflicting, which is what is causing the degradation and causing him to quicken essentially the span of his life. The more that he fights, the closer he comes to death. And that being said, for that character to take such drastic action and to sort of accept, because there's a scene with Hollander, he accepts his fate of death after Hollander essentially tells him, it's like, you're done. Like, there is no cure for what you're looking for. There's no answer I can give you that will help you. And he just says, then I'm fucking going. Then that's it. I'm gonna die, and I'm gonna just take everything else with me. And it's like, that's what that road leads to for him is all that defines the character. There is not more, in my opinion, that Genesis needs to do. Genesis his arc is over. Crisis Core was essentially Genesis's story concluded. And I don't think that if he does have a part to play in the future, it will be a main stage role. I don't think that he's going to have that. I think the connections that people are making to the color of Rebirth, the way that the symbol shows up, is supposed to be indicative of Genesis. I just don't think that it's in the way that people think it is. Everyone's like, "Oh, fucking Genesis is gonna swoop." No, it's not. It's not about him as a person coming back. It's about what his ideal represented and how that affects the rest of the story. So that's my opinion about about that. I
All
don't
right.
think it's gonna be anything.
Could you guys refresh me on like because I haven't played Dirge in a while. This whole entire time throughout like the original FF7, he's like in the like deep ground facility. He's with deep
Yeah,
ground.
he's in like a big crystal underground.
Right. So
'Cause I seen the end cutscene where
right. So the
he comes
refresher
and he-
is that he is basically revived. He takes Vice's body, and this is 3 years after the events of OG. It's 1 year after Advent Children. So
Mhm.
the latest point we see in the timeline of Final Fantasy VII is obviously Red with his kids 500 years later. The next latest point we see is Genesis being alive with Vice.
right.
That's literally the last thing that we see in the timeline, so to speak, of Final Fantasy VII.
Right.
Is Genesis flying away
He flies
to
away.
essentially the reason for his awakening is because he is the planet's warrior. Essentially, he like
He's the
fights
warrior
on
of light.
he's the warrior of light.
All right.
So upon
Yeah.
the death of Omega, which is the world-ending event that's happening,
Mhm.
he awakens via the planet to go stop another crisis. But
So
we
he's a
don't know
hero.
what that crisis is.
Right.
So he is a hero,
right.
essentially. So that's what happens to him then. But the point of why he awakens and anything like that has never been fully explained, other than he is awakening to stop or avert a crisis.
So what is that? What does
Ever
that put in your
crisis.
brain, Blitz?
Oh man.
Okay. What do you think? What does that put in your brain, Blitz?
Oh,
Genesis is the catalyst of Remake.
does he? Now I'm like questioning, will he even show up if he doesn't make an appearance and he's like
If he was in deep ground.
off screen somewhere
Yeah.
in deep ground, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think, Prince?
Thinking about it.
What do I think?
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I think it's entirely possible that Genesis is like the catalyst of Remake. Like this entire conflict, everything that's happening has been started by Genesis, right? Because we if this is any sort of sequel, let's just hypothetically say that it is, for the sake of argument. If it is, right? The last thing we leave off on in the compilation is
Is
that scene.
Genesis.
Is that scene with Genesis, right? And
I
back
pick up
in
what
the
you're
day,
putting down.
I don't know about you guys. Back in the day, I was like, oh, Final Fantasy 7 2.
2. Here we
Final
come.
Fantasy 7 2. Here we go. Let's go, boys. This is what's about to happen. Genesis or something, you know, that's gonna be like a sequel conflict that happens that they set up and that they've been setting up since like
Uh-huh.
Crisis Core, or not Crisis Core, but they have been setting up in the compilation.
Yeah.
And didn't happen. And now there is a lot of reason to believe Remake as a sequel. And if that is the case, then to me, that leads me to believe that it's entirely possible that while Sephiroth is being an opportunist and taking advantage of some of this stuff, that all of this could involve Genesis. And I think
Grand
that
scheme.
Rebirth using red in particular
Mm-hmm.
as a motif for its colors, its color scheme, red in particular, that obviously is like very Genesis crimson red, right? It's like the same shade of red.
Right.
And the timing of Crisis Core Reunion, right? I think that Zack is like the obvious thing, but I think that once you've already brought Zack, and Vice, and Nero, they're already in there, right? They're already in the frying pan. So I think that throwing Genesis in there is going to be a big deal. We've already known that Genesis is canon from Hojo's mention of him. I mean, what other way is there to work Genesis in, right? And also, we also know that Sephiroth, I would hope that Sephiroth is not the final boss of Rebirth. right? Like that would be lame to me if I fought this guy 3 times in a row on 3 different games.
Yeah.
There just would nothing would take the steam out of it for me other than fighting him on 3 separate occasions. And then I'm supposed to believe at the end of Final Fantasy VII Remind that that's actually the last time. So,
Get the
so
fuck outta here.
Fucking
uh,
put that in
Fucking
there.
you have to have somebody be the boss of part 2. I don't know if that would necessarily be Genesis, because even if he does show up, I don't know whether Genesis would actually show up necessarily as a villain. But I honestly wouldn't even be surprised if like Kadaj showed up in Rebirth or something like that, right? Because they are pulling these compilation elements out of order. So if I had to take a stab on like who Rebirth's final boss would be, I would say either Kadaj or Genesis. Because that's the most hype answer, right? Because if it's Sephiroth again, then I'm just like, oh god, I hate this. I hate this so much. I don't want to fight Sephiroth again right now. I already fought him too early. Yeah.
There's some truth in what you're saying, and
Yeah.
I think one of the things that
I do want to
Genesis
give Phil a chance to answer the question first.
Oh yeah, sure. Sorry.
I believe that I like what Nice Guy Prince said, that we have Nero, we have Vice in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in my mind, it's like it seems it's a revision. And when I say that, they want to make everything into one story. They don't want to be like, the perfect bookend to FF7. Like Nice Guy Prince said, it's a great story, right? It ends and that's it. And then it's like, oh, let's make up some new stuff for this story. So here's another game, and there's all these new characters. Like they want it to be one story now, which I think is really cool. So I think they could easily either work in Genesis like now. Maybe he's underground, he's frozen, as we saw happen to him. Maybe we see him get frozen. For all we know, that could have happened a little bit later because they just took him to deep ground, right? We don't know how he got there, do we? I don't actually think we know how he got in the crystal, unless I'm totally wrong there. But we could see how that happens.
He personally secludes himself. He decides not to join Deep Ground, and he decides instead to wait for an answer from the planet and leaves.
So
that's the only
where is that? By any chance, where is that explained?
Dirge of Cerberus.
That is all just interview.
Oh, that's in Dirge of Cerberus.
Yeah.
That fucking game went completely over my head.
Don't worry, you're not alone.
It's definitely in like some side whatever. Like it's probably not in the main.
It's in an interview. It's interviews.
I played it once.
Dirge's best experience when YouTube Man talks about him, right? So go find a YouTube man and let him tell you about Dirge, because that's the best way to experience.
So,
it.
So there you go. Maybe we see that. So we could see him do that. We could see him deny something like that because we already have Vice and Nero. We could see him interact with like Scarlet because she's down and knows deep ground folks and stuff, hanging out with them. I mean, we could have it so, like you said, he has actually engineered this entire thing. He's interacting with. He's trying to stop Sephiroth. Is he helping Sephiroth? One of the two. Like, there's a lot of ways we can get him. And it's kind of interesting too because it doesn't seem like he'd be a villain, right?
This is okay. So this is my wild swing answer
what you got?
To this question, and this I know is going to be the wildest swing I take. Genesis' role in the story of the remake trilogy is that he will be the mechanism by which Sephiroth influences the timeline. Sephiroth will in the future. So
there it is,
so
boys.
the conflict beyond Dirge that Genesis is involved with is a battle with Sephiroth, which Sephiroth will win and
hijack his thing. That'd be really cool.
Use Genesis as a mechanism. Use Genesis, Minerva, his tie to the planet as the mechanism by which he is altering the timeline. So basically, Genesis is the Whispers. Genesis and his tie to the planet is the Whispers. I still think that the final boss of Rebirth is the Cloud that did not have Zack as a as a legacy. Like the unborn hero, like the hero that was never made, like that everything is being set up to make Cloud's, you know, transformation, his corruption, have him be the most compelling final boss of Rebirth. That, you know, all of the things that have been undone and unset by future events, it's the only way to make things not contradictory, is that this is the way things happen after Dirge. So we are looking at the Final Fantasy VII that occurs as a result of things that happen beyond Dirge. You know, and I think Genesis is like you said, the catalyst, but I don't think Genesis itself or himself will be like a fight outside of a VR simulation. His role in the story will be a mechanic, because
that could be something we see later, like you know, near the end of the whole saga or something. We see this like flash forward, whatever you want to call it, where Sephiroth like fights Genesis and, you know, hijacks his power or whatever and hijacks his plan.
I think we will see that alarmingly early.
You think so?
Yeah, I think we might even see that before the game comes out.
Before Nibelheim.
Yeah, you're right. In the final trailer, you'll see like
exactly.
the entire scene.
Oh God.
Because
I shuddered.
I'm scared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Blitz is not in a good place.
Blitz is not...
I can't watch those trailers, bro.
Dude, I gotta not. The final one, oh man, scary stuff.
Actually, to jump off of what Clark is saying, there's some new lore tidbit that came out that essentially said to about the original game, about the weapons, that they were actually under the influence of Sephiroth. In some the weapons in the original game.
That's awesome.
So I think, to jump off of Clark's prediction, I think that the final fight a final fight with Genesis is going to be in tandem with like every single weapon. Which is just stupid, but I think it actually does
boss rush
fit, a boss rush with Genesis sort of in, because again, what I was going to mention is that, and very quickly, is that Genesis responds to the planet's call to him like a weapon would activate. A weapon activates to a threat, and then the way he awakens in Dirge is to essentially ward off a threat that has just started to occur. So he's just as white blood cell acting as the weapons are. He's
so
essentially.
You think Sephiroth will control him too?
I think at that point,
to
align with the original game, that is how they're going to shoehorn Genesis into the plot in order to make him more digestible.
Yeah.
Is to pair him with something that we all really want to see.
It'd be kind of cool too.
Like, you gotta have fiber with your Genesis. You
can't just raw dog Genesis.
Can't just be him alone
without some help.
That'd be kind of cool though. It's like, oh man, like he'd be like begging his old friend to like let him rest, stop, making him do all these things. It'd be interesting.
For sure. Absolutely. Okay, well, believe it or not, guys, we've kind of made it to the end of this discussion. And so I do want to give everybody like final thoughts, and then also tell us what you have coming up, because I think every single one of you has something exciting coming up. And Night Sky Prince, thank you so much for being here. I'm really excited for what you have going on tomorrow. Do you want to pitch that real quick?
Yeah, so if you guys are excited for Final Fantasy 16, I have Mike from Resonant Arc coming on my channel tomorrow to talk about FF16. So if you guys don't know, Mike has done some really incredible work over on his channel with the Final Fantasy series. He has, much like me, been burned by it quite a few times. And so this is two guys who have had our ups and downs, our highs and lows of the Final Fantasy series. And we're going to be talking about FF16 in a very hopeful, optimistic way. And it's just going to be a really good, thought-provoking chat that I think you guys are going to want to see. And that is going to be happening at noon PST. So you guys want to tune in over on my channel at twitch.tv/the Night Sky Prince. So please
Hell
be there.
yeah. Thank you for being it.
Awesome.
Okay. Hartshorn.
All right. So thank you so much for having me on. Always a pleasure to talk with the boys. And man, I always come out of these with like so many fun new ideas when I hear from you guys. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for having me. But yeah, I've got a new short film coming out from China that I shot at the Shaolin Temple.
Ooh.
It's action packed. It's thought provoking. I'll save the rest for the final trailer reveals. But there will be a trailer soon. With not quite as many spoilers as the FF tends to do sometimes. But yeah, stay tuned. Trailer incoming. Doing the final edits. Cannot wait to share with you. It's a big labor of love.
Hell yeah. Blitz, what you got cooking?
We're back. I am a multiverses content creator, but this game, Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, has come out, and it's looking like we're gonna have a lot of Final Fantasy VII stuff on the channel again, which will be great fun. I've been actually really thirsting for that. This talk was very refreshing, enlightened to a whole bunch of ideas by my peers, and I appreciate you guys. But if you guys are interested in all things related to Final Fantasy, feel free to check out the channel, youtube.com/blitz. Your boy just hit a nice milestone, and we're looking to continue to grow from there. While we were streaming, we hit 102,000 subscribers. That's
Damn.
crazy. Appreciate you guys so much for all that. I do have a question for you guys.
Yeah.
I just remembering towards the end of Crisis Core Reunion, when Cloud and Sephiroth are facing off and Cloud like stabs him in the back.
Yeah.
Did you notice like there was like whisper juice coming out of
That's there's like a black smoky effect.
Yeah.
I think I don't think that there was anything like profound there. I think that was just a weird ESRB Sero thing.
So
was there blood there before? Because I do know
effect.
that they removed some blood in the towards the ending.
So both when Sephiroth stabs Cloud and when Cloud stabs Sephiroth in Crisis Core Reunion has the same black smoke that came out of Barrett in Remake.
Yeah.
It's the exact same smoke.
Yeah.
So
whisper juice.
I don't know. I think it was just I think it's ESRB, but yeah, I'm sure.
Sadly,
I'm sure there will be several videos about it.
That's just to let us know that this is not a lethal blow. They are not dead from this.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, whisper juice, though. I do think that's what we should call it.
I do too.
Blitz, I want to take some time to special thank you. Blitz's his growth in the channel has been monumental. Like, it's been crazy to watch him blow up. I don't know if there's anybody that works harder than Blitz in the content creator game, and it's been really inspiring to watch. And you've also been like a huge personal help in making this come together. And you've given us a lot of content to make for the next few months, and I'm really eternally grateful for that. And always, you're one of my best friends, and I love having you on. Thank you so much, Blitz.
And you won't make me cry on stream. I love you guys.
Sleepezi. I'm just gonna pitch this that I've been involved in the back end watching you really work on this video, and the video could not be better timed. Of all the videos you've ever made, this is the one I'm most excited for, and just the little bits you've shown me, just remind me what like an A+ like video maker you are. And so, take us away. Did we lose him again? Is he muted again?
I'll let you guys know that from what I've saw, it's phenomenal. Like,
it looks real good.
I was very
cool.
invested in what he was talking about, the way that you did the script and the way that he did the editing and the cuts and all that stuff. It's really like, if you loved his last work, this is going to be something that's just completely like
Yeah.
So you're gonna want this to be
Uh,
on your radar and not miss out
I
on it.
watched the preview he sent us, and I was pissed when it ended. I was
Yeah.
like, God, I wanted
Yeah.
to see the rest. Yeah.
Yes.
It felt like a Night Sky King video. I'm like, wait, why isn't there more? I need more.
Now, there does need to
It
be.
means
Actually,
the
I have a little
world.
bit of a plan to bring NSK back. You'll see.
That sounds
Nice.
good.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Okay.
It
So
means the world to me for you guys to say that, by the way. So I really do appreciate you guys like taking even the time to look. And I'm just gonna say really quickly that I totally apologize for how long the video is taking. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to releasing it, and it's kind of a send off a little bit in a lot of ways because it's sort of the final thing that I really want to say about the game. So if you guys are wondering why it's taking so long, is because it's like a final little labor of love from me to you about like this game that I've been talking about for like 2 years now, and that's what I'm working on. So it's not just like another theory video. It's really just that, not the end, but definitely like it feels like the book is sort of closing in a lot of ways for this discussion. So thank you to everyone here too for just again being super supportive, and also love talking to you guys. Like the amount of insight that I get from just listening to you guys is out of control. You guys are like top tier content creators, and like I'm literally sitting here just like learning so much just from being next to you. So, thank you guys so much. And yeah, it will come out eventually. That's my plug.
I hear you. I hear you. And I'm excited for that. So, with that, guys, we're going to go ahead and say goodbye. Goodbye, YouTube.